Hey there, and welcome to Killer POV episode number 54. I'm your host, Rob G. from FEARNET and Icons of Fright. Sitting with me as always, Elric Kane, Inside Horror.
I'm still here.
He's still here.
Yep, I'll be here till the lights go out.
All right, enough of you. Rebekah McKendry from FANGORIA magazine. Hello.
How's it going, guys?
It goes.
Excellent.
You know how it is. So I'm very excited. We got...
I predict that the show is going to be incredible. It's going to be... I'm just guessing that this will be one of the most in-depth Stephen King interviews about Stephen King with the great Mick Garris you'll ever hear.
Yeah, we got Mick Garris coming in a little bit.
Yep, he's going to come in soon.
Director of Critters 2 and Psycho 4.
Yeah, I predict that we probably won't even remember to talk about Critters 2.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not going to ask him about that. I know it now.
In fact, yeah.
And Stephen King. Well, Stephen King's the topic, but we're sticking mostly to Stephen King movies. Yep. Although we will delve a little bit into our first impressions of his books and stuff like that.
We're predicting.
Yeah. We're predicting.
Yes.
This we can't know for sure.
Yes.
But anyway, so we saw a bunch of stuff. Actually, before we get to that, really quick, I just wanted to mention we've been doing a lot of contests on the website via our Facebook page. By the time you're listening to this, we're going to have a really kick-ass contest from a friend of mine over at Space Lab 9. We're giving away 2 vinyl copies of the Walking Dead soundtrack.
All right.
So
awesome.
Look for
I like
so look for the details on that on Facebook right now, and you could win that. And also, Holliston Season 2 just came out. I was able to get a couple of copies of the first season, and I got Adam, Joe, Laura, and some of the directors to sign a bunch of them for him. So be on the lookout. I'm going to give those out soon. Obviously, if you guys are on Geek Nation, you know that Adam and Joe host the Movie Crypt. So yeah, we're going to give away a couple copies of Holliston as well. So that's it. Contests.
Nice.
And now on to stuff that we've seen. Where should we begin?
Rebekah's
got a list.
I got a list.
Let's do one and then move and then one.
Okay.
Unless you can, it's a quick list.
Yeah, I can go through these.
I have a feeling that the interview portion of the show will be long.
I have a feeling too.
So we should make this part brief.
I predict it's going to be long, so I'll keep these short. But I saw some really good stuff this week. So I continued on with my Fast and Furious and Nightmare on Elm Street duo marathon, The Furious Nightmare. And so I made it through Nightmare 4, 5, and 6.
Sorry.
And
the three.
Which one's Freddy's Dead of that?
That
Freddy's Dead is
6.
6, yeah.
And I will get to that. Nightmare 4 is the one where she's pregnant. It's, or I'm sorry, no,
5.
that's 5. That's 5. 4 is
the Dream Master.
The Dream Master.
That's where we meet her. We meet Alice.
That's where we first meet Alice. And so 4 is pretty standard. I think that a lot of people consider that one to be one of their favorites. It was not my favorite. It did not triumph 3 for me, but it was cool.
Not much can triumph 3.
A lot of people love 4 because they saw it as a kid.
Yeah.
And it was the most successful of the series financially at the box office. But in retrospect, I watch it and I kind of hate it because 3 was the beginning of Funny Freddy, but he's still scary. 4 embraced that.
He's totally funny.
And that was Rennie Harlan. You know, I like Rennie Harlan as director. I thought he did a fine job with that. But, you know, you see any of the behind the scenes stuff and he said it. He's like, oh, he's James Bond now. So that's what I wanted to do with that movie. So that's the turning point in the series.
But doesn't 5 go dark again? With some of the rape stuff and his mother stuff.
They try to.
Yeah. It gets icky.
Yeah, icky. I agree with that.
I won't say it goes dark because there's no way to it doesn't mesh enough to make it dark. There's no emotional connection to it. It just gets icky because, there are
the backstory and stuff,
the rapey nun stuff.
Yeah.
But 5 for me, I always liked 5 when I was a kid for some reason. I always liked that one. And now that I'm watching it as an adult again, it's kind of batshit. It's all over the place. And then when I talked to John Skip, who is a friend of ours and was one of the writers on it, he kind of explained, why it has 10 writers attached and things like that. But my favorite part of it that I still love is the end sequence that they do when she's talking to Jacob, who's Freddy's kid, but not really. It's her kid as an adolescent. But they're in this place, which I can only call it's like MC Escher-esque.
That's right. That was part of it. That was the design. I remember hearing that.
And I love that scene. It was great. And I really like the motorcycle scene, too, for some reason.
Yeah,
that was fun.
I like the kills, even though I think that there's only 3 of them.
There's the pool, the motorcycle, and there's probably one more.
The girl, the model that gets herself fed to herself.
Yes,
yeah.
She gets stuff.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Well, whatever. If you're listening to this, you've seen it by now.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a pretty boring movie. So that's, I'm not giving that much away.
It was not it still didn't triumph 3. And then last night I watched 6, and rewatching Freddy's Dead, I came to a reason of why I like this film.
Tom Arnold and Roseanne.
No, but for me,
do a whole episode of this.
We have. I don't know if I can handle much more.
I'm elongating on it. For me, this is the Verhoeven of the Freddy movies because it becomes self-aware, tongue-in-cheek, and very what's cartoony.
Well, I agree with all those things, but all as negatives.
Almost filmed.
Whereas Verhoeven's films I like.
It's almost set up like a sitcom for me. Like a lot of it feels like a sitcom.
Drop the subject or there will be trouble. That's my Verhoeven reference.
That's beautiful.
Okay.
So, but anyway, so that's why after watching it again recently, that's why I like it. Is it's very, very.
I still do like the first 5 minutes. They're fun with the house dropping the Dorothy. That's fun.
No,
but then it just goes.
To me, that's when it becomes the scary movie of the franchise.
It's true.
I will say one of my favorite kills of the franchise, and just because it's so mean spirited, is when he kills Carlos, the deaf kid.
The deaf kid with the giant Q-tip.
Yeah, the Q-tip, and he puts a thing in his ear that makes his hearing super sensitive and starts scratching the board.
And
I just find that funny.
Shame on you, Robert Englund. Shame on you.
He's hilarious at it though, because Freddy's like humping the board while he's scratching it. It's quite fun.
Yeah.
So then I watched 3 new films this week, which I will talk about. In Fear. Have you guys seen it yet?
Oh, no,
I talked about it on the previous show.
Yes.
Yeah,
the one before the previous one, the Irish thriller.
Yes.
But I loved the build up, but didn't love the conclusion.
That was mine too.
But it has real good chemistry, and you're really
Great
in
chemistry, and I got to say, I absolutely loved the filming of it because it was obviously digital, and it is so hard to film digital in dim lighting. And really, the whole thing was like lit by a car, but it was beautifully cinematic. I loved everything up until the ending, and then I was just like, "Oh man, come on,
you
give
just
me
want a
more
little
than that."
more." And I wonder if that was because I think the film was made in a not unscripted, but in a way where the people didn't know what their characters would end up doing, and it maybe ends at a point where you still could have had another 20 minutes to explain what's going on. So but the build up was great and well made.
Yeah, it was
tight film.
Now, I also watched Dead Shadows.
I thought Stage Fright was coming because I've heard a lot of people writing about it. This is a
new
musical,
Stage
right?
Fright.
This is the musical. I watched it this weekend, but I'll get there in a sec. So I watched Dead Shadows, which is a new one coming out from Scream Factory, and it's a French film. And what's weird is I'd seen it a couple of years ago at a festival, and when I saw it, I didn't like it at all because the digital effects looked bad and it had a weird soundtrack, and I don't remember it being very clean or crisp. Apparently, Scream Factory did like a really nice clean on it. It's now very clean, crisp. They took out some of the weird soundtracking and put in, I think I heard Sponge at least once in there. So it had kind of a...
You mean like a real sponge?
No, like the band Sponge. I think it could have been a different band from my teen years. But yeah, it definitely had like a grunge song in there. But yeah, so it definitely had kind of a much nicer feel to it. So I was totally into this film and I was enjoying it, and it's a nice brisk, like 70 minutes long. So it's
like Halloween H2O length.
Yeah, you're in and you're out. And then I went back and I watched the special features, and it kind of killed it for me because the movie itself, it's very Cronenberg-esque. It's about a meteor that crashes into Paris and it starts turning people into these kind of over-sexualized mutants. And so it's got all of these great mutations and everything. And then I go back and watch it, and it was made by a marketing executive who was kind of trying to shape something that he knew would sell well. And then once I went back and looked at how they did it, like there's a making of thing on there, and it is so digitized. Like none of it was, I'll say very little of it was actually done.
So maybe watch the movie, don't watch the special features.
That's kind of where I'm at.
If you want to enjoy yourself.
It was a fun movie, I do have to say. Like it was a really fun movie. So for me as a horror fan and being passionate about practical effects, to then go back and see that everything, they did not make a single creature to see that.
So I bet that's not that uncommon now. I mean, I think a lot of indie films do that, unfortunately,
And then the one that Elric has aforementioned, Stage Fright. I watched this on Friday night. I invited you guys to join us, but you guys kind of crapped out on us.
I remember what I was doing.
You had a family thing or something.
And something happened.
Yeah, so...
Some disaster.
Yeah,
my life's ruined.
Morgan Peter Brown came over and we celebrated Dave's birthday by drinking scotch and eating pizza.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Happy birthday, Dave. And so we drank scotch, ate pizza, and we watched Adam Girosh's film Fractured first, and then we followed it up with Stage Fright. And Morgan and I, Morgan is one of the lead actors in Absentia. He does a bunch of horror films, but he is also comes from a musical theater background like I did. We both absolutely loved it. It was like one of my favorite films of this year so far. Is
it because of the musical theater, or is it just a good movie regardless?
I think it's a good movie. Okay. I think it's well made. I think it's well put together.
Is this a Sundance or South by film that came from one of those, or doesn't? You're not sure?
I'm sure it would have.
Maybe it's South by?
Sounds like it would have played at those.
It just played at some festival a few months ago, but they already had a release.
Yeah, it's through IFC. But
I think it's because what's the short film the director made?
Oh, Oh,
The Legend of Beaver Dam or something like that.
He did a short.
He did this short a few years ago that was very, very impressive. So I think the movie came out of that. And,
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. No, I hear it's more comical than anything.
It is. I can't call it a horror film. There's no like scary moments in it. It's just
it has
more
horror tropes, like it's got a slasher. Okay.
Yeah, it's literally a group of kids gather for musical theater camp, and they're doing this supposedly cursed show because somebody has always died when performing the show, and somebody starts killing off the campers. And yes, if you don't like musical theater and you don't like musicals, you will not like this because it's a musical pretty much throughout. I mean, it's got a couple
so they're
of
actually
lines.
singing as characters, or are they singing when they're in?
As characters through the whole thing. I mean, very little of it is not sung. It's got Meatloaf in it. He plays the guy in charge of the camp and is surprisingly good in it. So yeah,
he's a good actor.
If you like,
Meatloaf's good.
If you're like me and you like musical theater and horror, it's a nice little melding of the
Or if
worlds.
you just like Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Okay, I might watch it. I'm like borderline.
I think I'm going to watch it.
Okay, if he says it's good as well, and both of you are saying it's good, maybe then
right.
I will tip the scale for a musical theater.
I will definitely.
Did you watch Phantom of the Paradise yet?
No.
What the fuck, Elric?
Well, I need to borrow her play. Well, no, fuck all that. I'm going to wait till Scream Factory release, and that will be my reveal.
Fair enough.
I'll wait for the Blu-ray reveal, and that will be my...
I have a Blu-ray.
Yeah, but you've got this foreign, I don't touch anything foreign. That's cooties.
Says the guy from New Zealand.
Yeah. G'day.
What'd you see?
Elric and I went to a midnight screening of Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 at the New Beverly that Brian Collins was hosting as part of... At midnight? I said that.
Yeah, I paid the price for that.
The midnight screening.
Oh, did you really?
The next day. Yeah.
I convinced Elric to come, even though it was.
No, I wanted. You know what? I think we talked about this
one.
once.
Theatrical movies you've always wanted to see.
Yeah, we said that if we could play. Now I regret that because of things we're going to talk about. But that was just one of those films I'd never seen on screen. I had loved watching it on VHS. I was always scared of the VHS cover in New Zealand because I always said the most controversial film, and I always enjoyed watching it. Thought it was great, gory fun, and then seeing it with you was a very just kind of like shocking experience in a way.
Shocking, but still
a fun film. But
yeah, Leatherface is one of my favorite movies. I love it. I was telling you on the line, I was 14 years old when it came out, and I waited in line all day for somebody to pretend to be my older brother to get me in, and they did. And at 14, I'd already seen the first two movies. So at that age, it was like the perfect like Texas Chainsaw movie. Leatherface was scary and badass. There was this whole family that was like really unique and different, yet they were sort of familiar to what we've seen in the previous movies. And to me, what really sold it, and this is funny, this taps into a little bit of the ending, which is, I don't think it is a spoiler, so apologies in advance, but one of the main characters, is supposed to die, but because people like him in the test screenings, he inexplicably comes back. Meaning, like, there's no way he could have survived. Yeah. And it's kind of hilarious when he comes back, and it actually got a huge response from the audience.
He was also there.
He was there. Ken
Foray from Dawn of the Dead.
But the thing is, as a kid, it's the only time the franchise has had a character go toe to toe with Leatherface, and not in the Dennis Hopper way where he's fighting him with a chainsaw. Right. It's a dude that's physically fighting him hand to hand, and I thought that was awesome. And the plan, had it been successful, was they would have brought him back for a sequel, and it would have been him and Leatherface again. So I kind of like that they were trying to give Leatherface kind of an arch nemesis, so to speak, for the first time in the franchise, but it didn't happen. They had a release date for November of 1989 before they had the movie in the can. And Jeff Bird did his best, but they just could not get it past the ratings board.
Because largely what they talk about in the documentary is because they were gunning for them because number 2 went out unrated as a kind of fuck you to the classification bureau. And because of that, this film was kind of probably doomed on that level.
Yeah.
And the documentary that Rob kept insisting I watch after this, because it was kind of a shocking experience watching it theatrically.
What did you think at the theater?
I had fun, but this, honestly, the more I've thought about this, the more angry I've gotten. And the more I think, I'll go on record to say, I think Leatherface is one of the top sequels.
What?
Yeah. Like really one of the best horror, but not the movie we saw in theater. And I tell you why I think it's so serious, because these cuts were not minor. These are cuts to. This is what I'd say. If you're going to make a movie that's called Leatherface and it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and you go out of and you've got what's his name from Walking Dead, Nicotero, doing just these incredible kill effects.
Yeah,
and then all of those are cut out. why I think it's a big deal, and I actually think this is like one of the bigger deals I've noticed in horror recently, is that as an example, as a movie, is what you've actually done, the studio, New Line, have done effectively is neutered a film, and therefore actually made a movie meaningless, because the movie is the visceral quality isn't just there to shock and titillate. Like I think maybe the Friday 13th is at 5. What's the telekinetic? 7. I think those effects would have made it even more fun, but I feel with this Leatherface, so afterwards the unrated DVD of it, which I rewatched, which is what I would have seen as a kid, which is my memory of a movie, there's so many moments that are so extreme that is what the movie is. It's not just like, oh, it's cool to have some gore. Him holding a chainsaw and carving a girl for like 20 seconds of blood just drenching him is the actual essence of what a movie called Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is. So if you strip all of that out, and it's not just that, there's a satire in this film about the nuclear family that they eliminate. The little girl comes in, when I was watching the documentary about it, the little girl comes in and says, you told me it'd be my turn to kill. She pulls a cord and a massive sledgehammer kills one of the main characters in the head, and in that moment, and then hugs, and all the family are happy. And it's this comment on this weird new nuclear family in America that are all together. They eliminate that entire scene.
It's incoherent.
They take the girl out of it, so because a girl can't make the murder. That strips a film of its meaning, not just a good scene. Now it's not a satire. So you're talking about an MPA making cuts that have actually not just like neutered or hurt a film, but they've changed its actual meaning and taken away the value that it did have. And this is New Line also largely responsible for allowing it, because they could have still put it out on Raid or something. And for all these things go out in the world, and you're like, man, this is like, within horror, if you had done the same thing to a drama, like Sophie's Choice, you cut a few scenes out, chances are you're not going to change the context of the movie.
Yeah.
This is changing what it is at its fundamental core. It's really weird. It sounds like kind of dorky, but when I was watching the documentary and then I rewatched the second half of the whole film, like you told me to, and it's so freaking good because it's so visceral, and and those moments, even though it still has humor, and I'm not saying the theatrical is a bad movie, but it's not it's not the movie. It's not the movie. Just period. Like.
The Q&A felt longer than the movie.
Yeah. The movie raced by. It was like, it felt like 70 minutes without that. But there's something really interesting about that as a sequel. I mean, I always liked it as a sequel, but now after rewatching that and then watching the documentary and realizing what they're up against, there's something about all of it together where I'm like, no. What
documentary is this?
It's like just on the DVD. It's like 25 minutes.
No, it's like 45.
Oh, it's 45?
It's pretty long, but it's a pretty extensive interview.
Very honest.
Very honest.
The director talking about all the problems that they basically, from as soon as he starts shooting, it's clear that they kind of hate him and want to get rid of him, and he's doing the best he can.
Fired
him
at one point in the middle of the shoot, rehired him.
But I think this is a really interesting. I think like it'd be interesting to like point out a few movies like this and look back at them and go like, you're not just hurting a movie, you're actually assassinating it.
Yeah.
Like it is not a movie anymore almost.
This is the most extreme case of this I think I've ever seen.
There's a really good book called Hollywood versus Hardcore, I think it's called. But it focuses on censorship in Hollywood and how cuts are made and how they determine. And essentially like what happens if you piss off the ratings board. And things like, and how grudges are held.
Well, there's the Kirby Dick documentary all about the censorship. There's like from 2 years ago, and it goes so in depth in it to try to reveal them for what they are, which is a bunch of, middle-aged, honestly, it's mostly middle-aged women. That's what he discovered, that largely it was like soccer moms in this thing, and Jack Valenti. And so, but the main thing that he realized through that documentary is that they really go after more than gore and violence. They go after woman's sexuality. Kimberly Pierce's Boys Don't Cry, there's a thing that's censored because she enjoys her orgasm.
Yes.
Things like that. So it's just bullshit. They shouldn't exist. I come from a place that also has censorship of a different kind, but it wouldn't hurt your film. You know what I mean? So you could go out unrated. That's your choice. But it's not like it's going to be this big deal. In America, it's more about by pushing you unrated, they know they're going to hurt your box office so much that you have to go to them. It's like this but really it's just a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Because kids like us will still go and find these we'll sneak into these fucking movies. We'll steal these movies. We'll find some way.
You said kids like us.
We are kids like us.
Well, I mean, that's how we saw
it. That's how we were, right?
Yeah, there's an interesting documentary, somewhat related to this, called Clean Flicks. I actually caught it.
That's a good doc.
Yeah, I caught it on Netflix Instant. A friend of mine that I met recently, this girl Amber Bullinger, is one of the producers on it, and recommended that I check it out. And it's interesting because that's more editing regular mainstream movies for religious people that don't want to set
Mormons
stuff. But it's interesting seeing, because they show scenes from movies like The Matrix, and they show the edited version, and that's definitely like once filmmakers heard this was happening, like no, now you're changing the intent.
Started suing.
Yeah, they started suing.
Requiem for a Dream did that at Blockbuster.
Yeah.
They had a different Eyes Wide Shut in America in general was a very different movie than the one I saw when it came out.
With clean flicks, the big question was that, and this happens with television all the time, where they're not editing for art, and they give the director no say in it. It's just a slice. Who cares if it makes sense or what the fuck happens? You know,
I can live with that. I can live with that kind of stuff when it's like, oh, this movie's played theatrical, now it's going to TV, and they brutalize it. But hey, but like Mick will say in the future, that was a close call. Like Mick was saying, there's always the book, and in this case, there's always the movie. But in Leatherface's case, these motherfuckers were cutting the negative.
Yeah,
they were taking stuff out of the negative, which means once those cuts are made, if they don't keep the little piece of film, it's gone.
Yeah, so the DVD has an unrated cut, and it's pretty close to what it would be.
I mean, it's still pretty awesome. There's some pretty great
there's
stuff.
Still a lot missing, as you could tell from the deleted scenes, which are like work print stuff. Yeah.
And Viggo Mortensen is really cool. And I mean,
amazing in it.
It's a really fun film. And what I think one of the reasons we're going to continue our conversation about this, because there's a lot more to go into, because next week we will have the writer of that film here. But there is, what I like about it is these horror films that are set in a very brief time period. Like here's a few hours and go, and now you're being chased. Like I really like, that's kind of refreshing, and I think it works so well in number one that it was something they were trying to recreate.
Right.
Anyway, it's just really interesting. Had I just seen the movie again, I probably would have just been like, man, I guess I was remembering a different movie, because it just wasn't, it was just weird. So I'm glad I rewatched all that from you. So thanks, Rob.
Sure.
I'll be real quick. This is not horror, but it's the best thing I could ever tell you to go see. Jodorowsky's Dune, one of my favorite directors.
Oh, how'd you get to see it?
I went to it. I actually went to the theater. I was doing a website thing, and we snuck out and did this in between me and a friend of mine. And it's just absolutely like one of the most inspiring films I've ever seen. He's always been one of the most inspiring filmmakers anyway to me, in terms of quotes and just kind of mysticism, just being one of those guys. But this film really is incredible for the scope, and what he keeps saying, that you'll walk away out of this movie feeling really energized about any kind of film you want to make. And this happens to be kind of sci-fi, is just, be ambitious. He's like, this is a huge failure in his life, huge, astronomical. What he had the most amazing elements you could ever get together to make a movie. Like literally could have been the greatest thing ever made, but it doesn't exist. And he's like, and then so what? He kept saying, after all of this, he's like, and then so what? What's next? Let's do. You have to be ambitious. Be ambitious. He keeps going, I want to live to be 300. Doesn't mean I will, but I have to believe that. I have to want that. Otherwise, you can't achieve that,
Yeah.
And it's just really incredible. But the most incredible for horror fans is the realization that one of the first things he does is he ended up getting Dan O'Bannon. It's a crazy story, and I won't run in the film, but he was after Douglas Turnbull, who did Star Wars in 2001, to be the special effects on it, and he met him and hated him, and so he can't be my guy. And he walks out of that meeting, goes down the street, and walks in to see Dark Star playing in some little cinema, and he goes, this is the guy for our special. And so he looks up Dan O'Bannon, who we all know more as a writer and director of Return of the Living Dead. But he called him up and said, sell all your possessions, move to Paris, and Dan O'Bannon did, and moved in with him for the next 2 years and worked on what they were going to be. And through that, they got Giger to design one of the creatures. And all of this happens, whatever, I won't ruin the twist of the story, but years and years later, why do you think H.R. Giger is brought into the world of Alien, which Dan O'Bannon, all of this would have changed the course of science fiction forever if that connection hadn't been made, because there'd probably be no aliens, no Blade Runner. No Blade Runner means basically everything up to Matrix is gone. So it's kind of almost a weird Back to the Future kind of timeline. So Jodorowsky even talks about it, where he's like, all these people, all of them who were working for him, all worked on Alien. That whole group, there was 6. They all ended up on Alien at some point. So in some ways, he was feeling proud that this little group of incredible artists who shouldn't work together but did made this. So I think for genre fans, it's definitely worth seeing. But for anyone with a heart for cinema and especially all the struggles you go through and the low points where you feel like nothing's possible, it's just you walk out kind of flying out. This guy's just so awesome.
That's great.
So I highly recommend it. My last story is just a sad story, and I'm not going to probably do this much longer. Trying to see things that somebody you already know are going to be shit, and you go, well, you know what? I need to know. this is like one of the low points of my life. I got to say, Doug Bradley came to Jump Cut a few weeks ago. He talked about the Hellraiser franchise, and as what you know, I'm a big fan of the first three. And he talked about, I hadn't seen the last couple, and he said, people are asking him about the last one, and he said he hasn't seen it and will never see it, or probably not see it. That he was replaced by. He had the choice to be in this movie. He told us the story about it, which was basically the Weinsteins. Very honestly, it was like, look, basically they found out that they hadn't made one in a few years. But they were basically going to lose the property of Hellraiser if they didn't make a film within about a 4-month turnaround. No script. They asked him, do you want me? He goes, that doesn't sound possible. Banged out a script. This is the worst thing I've ever read. These lines are like, basically almost Pinhead having lines like, come on, bring it on, or something. Yeah. Like, what the hell are you smoking?
I saw parts of it. It starts out almost like a found footage film.
Well, it does.
That's what it was supposed to be.
So Doug Bradley, anyway, he talked about it, and it's very interesting. So clearly, basically, this awful movie, was just made for the most callous, of reasons like, hey, let's just keep the franchise. Now, that said, I feel like if you had 4 months and you hired a really interesting up-and-coming director and said, do anything you want because it doesn't matter, maybe somebody would have knocked it out of the park. Yeah. Instead, they made, I'm not even kidding. I might speak in superlatives. I might go on record and say it's my least favorite movie. Dreamcatcher in the future I might also mention, but Dreamcatcher, is different kinds of big Hollywood thing. I hated everything about this movie. It basically felt like an LA softcore erotic movie that you'd see where a bunch of kind of chiseled looking adults in a nice swanky house cross-cut with on-the-nose found footage, and instead of cutting to shots of people having sex where a normal softcore movie, it'll cut to the next room, which I imagine was the next room, where literally this bad faux Pinhead is walking, pacing, waiting for shit. It has shots of him cross-cut pacing, like he's just waiting for someone to open the box, and he's just like kind of scowling. And he looks terrible.
Yeah. He's the worst actor.
But, and I feel bad for the actor anyway, because whoever you are, I'm not surprised you would take it, because who wouldn't? It's terrible. It's shot almost in light. Like the light we're recording this room, they shoot the Pinhead scenes. It basically anything that works in the first, they'll then copy a little bit. They'll have like one of the characters all bloodied, wearing a white shirt and smoking. Everything about the film is what I hate about the worst of cinema, including from the point of making it to the execution of making it to and I felt bad watching it. Afterwards, I felt like a bad person, felt like I was a stupid person, and I regretted the hour and a half and maybe 8 minutes I fast forwarded on Netflix to get to the end. But it's also just, it's just a horrible movie. Never watch it. But also it really, poisons something about that. It makes me also love that Doug, the director I've heard other people involved say, well, we had very little time and, I had to do this. Doug Bradley said no. You always can say no.
Yeah.
If something's going to be terrible, you can always say no. So anyway, that was, hopefully I'm watching that to save you guys. Brian Collins then did tweet to me that, not as bad as the one, with Lance Henriksen on the internet thing. I watched it straight after just to see. And I said, no.
Yeah, he's wrong.
I can watch Lance Henriksen, that movie, who at least is fun to watch. It's not a good movie by any means. It's a bad movie. But it is, this other one to me is like the depths of the low of what the genre can do.
Right.
And so hopefully if somebody ever reboots it, I don't think the Weinsteins deserve it.
Nope.
They don't. It'd be nice if they lost.
So that's my little rant about that. It was really a god-awful movie.
Okay.
And I don't think I'll do that anymore. If somebody tells me something's like terrible and you shouldn't ever watch it, I think maybe...
Life is too precious.
I think it is. I think it is.
Time. Lastly, I just want, because our guest has arrived, so I'd like to bring them in as soon as possible. But I just want to say that I went and caught Stuart Gordon's new play, Taste.
That was too much of a flourish.
Got to wrap this up.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, Stuart Gordon's got a new play here in town called Taste, and it's loosely based on the true story of the Rottenburg cannibal, which is the story of the guy that
the German
went on the German that went on the internet and found a guy who willingly wanted to be eaten and consumed by this person.
Which there have been a lot of dark, grim movies about.
There have. And this was based on a script by a writer named Benjamin Brand. It was written as a play. And it's a 2-act play with a 2-person play with Chris McKenna, who was
from
in
Reanimator
the musical. He's the lead of King of the Ants.
And Mike Williamson's.
Oh, yeah, he's in Mike Williamson's short. Yeah, that's true. And Donald Toms Capello. It's these two guys. And yeah, it's just kind of all in one night where the set is an apartment and it's got a fully operational kitchen. And it's literally this history, the one night of these guys meeting for the first time and the last time, and kind of going through the whole ordeal of deciding to do this thing. And it's amazing. It's a really interesting piece of work. It's a dark comedy. I mean, it's a serious subject, what they're doing, but it's hard. It's Stuart. It's hard not to kind of find the dark humor in this situation. And I think a lot of what they do in it in terms of the reason they have the working kitchen is right in the opening, you know, the main character's cutting an onion and starts cooking it. And the aroma of this onion fills the entire room up. So you're already kind of, I like the way that it plays with your senses essentially. But the less I tell you, the better.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to know. I mean, you know the premise of it. And in fact, there's some really graphic stuff. They will check to make sure that you are 18 or up.
Wow.
So if you are uncomfortable with very graphic sexuality and sexual stuff, you do not want to go to this.
You probably aren't listening to this show.
You're probably not listening to this.
I think our listeners are pretty safe.
Now, I wonder if he'll travel outside after it goes, just for people who aren't in LA.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I saw it in previews. It starts officially today, Friday, and it's playing for the month at, what's this theater? This is at the Sacred, it's the Sacred Fools Theater. They're going to try it out for about a month. The one thing I will say, I've always liked Chris McKenna. I think he's a fine actor. He was great in King of the Ants, and he's really funny in Reanimator the musical. This performance is unbelievable. He is so good in it, and he's the one that wants to be killed and eaten. And I mean,
which is the more interesting, psychology. For sure, right? That's very aberrant.
To see
that's the one that shocked me.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that somebody wants to eat somebody, it's weird, but, you know, we've
But there's
heard
been
stories.
cannibals,
yeah.
But somebody is willing. That's where it's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, seeing him go from meeting him and going through that whole journey, it's just, his acting is unbelievable.
And that, in general, I think is a common thing that we talk about, and it seems to be with Stuart, too, is actors who you have seen in a certain context your whole life or a couple times who are good or really fun, and then seeing them in something else where it's like, oh my God.
That's the thing.
And that's Jeff and Nevermore, his next level, and it's cool to hear that.
I think this is almost on par with what
Which is
Jeff
great to
did.
hear.
He's amazing in it. And, the thing I love about Stuart is he likes pushing buttons and continually doing. This is not what I would expect Stuart to do, but it's a really interesting thing. And there's a lot of graphic things in it that definitely made me very uncomfortable. And again, I don't want to spoil it. You have to see it. But and then the greatest thing, I mean, this was preview, so the funnest part was seeing Stuart come out with a little clipboard at the very end,
questions,
get in front of the audience, and be like, okay, so what didn't you like? What didn't work? And what did? And literally just having a candid chat, like with a room of strangers.
Yeah.
I was sitting with Graham Skipper and hearing us kind of, and he really does take it to heart. He's not one of these filmmakers that's like, just tell me that everything's amazing. Yeah. He really wants to know how to make the show as good as it possibly could be. Which is really the difference between theater and film directors at their core. Or film director. He's a film director who originated from a very different process. Yeah. So if you're in LA, I strongly recommend going to check it out. It's quite an experience. We have an incredible show coming up for you. We will have a very long conversation with Mick Garris, which will be electric. We will go over every Stephen King film I predict halfway through going through every, we might falter, but it is going to be a hell of a show, and you're going to like it. Elric will profess his love for Dreamcatcher. I will. Okay, I'm going to snap my fingers, and Mick Garris will be here. All right. Okay, and welcome back. We are sitting here with our very special guest, Mr. Mick Garris. Ooh, I want to meet him. Welcome to Killer POV. We've all met Mick before. Yeah. We're all friends yesterday. Yeah. We all hang out at this magical place called Jump Cut. Elric Kane. Yeah. Every time I think I talk to you about Sleepwalkers now. Yes. I think I keep repeatedly asking you about Mad Chinamic nude scenes. But. Well, of course. Yeah, well. Who could resist? Not for me. She saved that for the movie after. So. Yeah. Right, you're telling me that story. Dream Lover. Yeah. There's a lot of it in Dream Lover. I think we should just intercut those scenes of Dream Lover into Sleepwalkers, and you'll be completely satisfied. Sure. Wow. And she's in a series now called Witches of East End, and she does a lot of nudity that has, coverage in certain places. Okay. And I'm going to do one. I'm going to direct one of those this summer. Oh, so you'll get to direct her again? I haven't seen her in years and years. Wow, that'll be fun. I will be working with Machen in July. That's cool. Yeah. That's cool. That's great. God, where do we start here? I mean... Well, we had been talking on our show, and this is pure curiosity. I've never asked about it. We were talking about that interview
that he did with John Landis,
Oh,
Carpenter, and Cronenberg, which for me was huge when I saw that, because it was kind of pre-extra features and all that, and it was such a good, like a great, alchemy of people together. How early, like, I don't know even where you were in your career at that point. Were you
I was actually doing publicity for Universal. I had, my first movie job was at Avco Embassy, and I was there doing specialized genre publicity for The Fog, The Howling, Escape from New York. I was there at just the right time.
Right.
And I had met Joe Dante before then, and I had a cameo in The Howling, and need to rewatch
that now.
Yeah.
Where are you? Which sequence?
Me and my ex-wife. There's a scene near the end where Dee Wallace is turning into a werewolf on the news.
Oh, yeah.
And they cut to people around town and their various reactions. And so she and I are in our bathrobes. And I flip through TV Guide and I say, "What is this?"
That's awesome. Got to go
look
back.
for that screen grab on Twitter.
Totally.
Great moments in genre history.
Yeah, there you go.
And you had done the special features. Well,
what I had done, I was doing publicity and I did making ofs and things, but I thought it would be a great idea because Universal at the time, the head of Avco Embassy moved to run Universal Studios, and he brought me in because they had a bunch of genre stuff coming up. So I did publicity on The Thing and on American Werewolf and on Videodrome. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, this would be great. Let's do this half-hour pilot for a series of interviews that would pertain to Universal movies and give it away to all of these. Cable was fairly new. The original cable channels that were national were relatively new in the early 80s. And so I thought, well, I did my Z Channel show. I will do the interview. And so the idea of doing a couch of three great genre directors who had movies coming out at that studio at the time would not seem like a commercial, and it would be programming, and it played all over the country, and it was lots of fun. But it's the only one we ever made. So that was the genesis. So you weren't
friends with them at that stage?
Actually, I had worked with Cronenberg when I was at Avco Embassy. I did a lot of the campaign for Scanners. And
because it has that feeling. That's why it's such a good. It feels like you already knew these guys and had completely natural. I was unit publicist on Halloween 2 for John Carpenter and did stuff for him as well. And Cronenberg and John Landis and I. John was my first director friend. I was doing answering phones for Star Wars, the original Star Wars, and my office was next door to John's when he was getting ready to leave and shoot Animal House. And we became good friends there. And so it really, I had done publicity on like 5 Carpenter pictures from The Fog and Escape from New York and Halloween 2 and all this stuff. So they were guys I knew pretty well and was pretty comfortable with. And so we got this cheesy little studio, the cheapest place I could find out here in the Valley. And that's how that came together. And so it ended up being on, the Videodrome Criterion.
Yeah.
disc.
I don't even know where I must have seen it on TV when I was a kid because I had seen it a long time ago and just loved it.
Well, we just gave it away, so it played all over the country.
Yeah, I don't even, I said that when I was here, I didn't remember where I saw it. And I didn't even know it was on Videodrome, so that's great.
Yeah, they put it on that. I have a question about that time period from your perspective, if you remember. I mean,
no, I don't remember.
Well, it's funny because now, all those guys obviously are, masters of horror, and the work they were doing was just so incredible, and we hold it in such high regard now. But it was funny. I was just watching Clark Wolf had done a video of like classic horror movies, but like reading out the reviews from when they came out.
Right.
So, for example, like The Thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like not a single positive review for John Carpenter's The Thing.
And American Werewolf, same thing, and Landis had been through it before because Animal House never got any good reviews.
Right.
Not one good review. And it became the most successful comedy in history at the time. First one to ever gross over $100 million. But the genre, we know it's always been the gutter.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no respect until, the people who were adolescent when those movies came out become adults, and they had a big part in the nurturing of their psyches, and they realized that An American Werewolf in London was a classic and a brilliantly written and conceived movie. The Cronenbergs of the world, even at the time, that Scanners came out. You know, I kind of invented a campaign. I did a Cronenberg Film Festival of his previous movies.
Wow.
They came from within, Rabid and The Brood, and then climaxing at midnight with the first screening ever of Scanners, and that was at the Hollywood Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. And so I sent out press releases saying, from the acknowledged master of the genre. Well, nobody knew who he was.
You decided he was.
But I had decided, and there were a few critics who had actually realized, oh my God, this is really great. But I remember introducing David to Deborah Hill and John Carpenter, and they were so crazy about Rabid and just raving about the writing of Rabid. And, you know, people within the genre have respect for it and can tell the difference between the good and the shit.
Right.
And outside the genre, it's all shit to them because it's unpretty. You know, it's unpleasant. And a lot of people don't like the blood and guts shoved in their face. I mean, hopefully nobody likes that shoved in their face for real. But, you know, then they discover later on that this is a coping mechanism. This is something that makes you stronger. This is something that's healthy for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see a film where I get that. I understand why at the time it wasn't revered. I to this day cannot. I try to understand how The Thing was not received, and because we're talking not just now people like it. We're talking a lot of people, a lot of these lists now will put it number 1 or 2 in the best one, and I really think it's one of the most perfect movies.
It's so well constructed.
So you wondered, and I know John said something last week. We did that Cinemayhem thing. He said something that part of it he thought was that E.T. was the alien that was coming out at the same time.
Oh, so aliens were good at that point?
Well, like maybe that he felt
and
like
the
there
same
was a popular,
studio, and the same studio as well. Now, the thing to remember is E.T. The Thing was also a total flop.
Yeah,
you know, it was a disaster.
Right.
I was at the studio at the time doing a documentary on the making of The Thing. I was working on E.T. and we had this marketing meeting at this big table when Steven Spielberg comes in, and he'd already been on my Z Channel show, and he goes, "Hi, Mick," and everybody around the table goes, "Ooh,
that's cool." Can we see that anywhere, or is that like with the internet? I just
what the making?
Yeah, I've seen
of
the documentary
thing?
about this. No, the Z Channel.
The Z Channel.
I've seen the documentary about the.
There are a bunch of the shows that are on some of the Masters of Horror discs.
Oh.
There are like a half a dozen of them, but I just discovered most of them from old Betamax tapes.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
And I may put together a YouTube channel or something.
That would be just so
those
cool.
and the postmortem shows as well.
Because we had Zan Cassavetes here early on in our run, and she had made that film. And I always loved that film because
I was away shooting when she wanted to talk to me for the documentary because Charles Champlin and I were the only two hosts and interviewers on the channel.
So you would have, I'm sure you would have had a perspective on him. And
well, it was a fascinating experience, and the Z Channel, for those who don't know, was the first pay TV channel in LA, even before HBO, Showtime, or any of that. And it was on the West Side, and it was Century Cable. Before that was Theta Cable, and it's now been, it eventually became Time Warner, part of Time Warner. But they used to show genre films, and I would do an interview at the beginning of them with the filmmakers of those shows. And Spielberg was on it, and Landis was on it, and Cronenberg.
Which means he was like one of us.
Yeah.
So we could still become something with our lives. Mick gives us hope.
It's all over now.
Okay. But that is really, the movies, I think the big part of that were they were showing movies that just TV channels didn't show. Like, movies like Heaven's Gate or something that just artistic or horror, or just a great mixture of cinema. And
just what they could get that was special. And they would give me a list of things that were coming up and say, who can you get? Is there anything here that you like that you can get? And, I had John Borman on with Exorcist 2.
Oh, wow. Yes. That's incredible. That's huge.
And Friedkin was on, and he was so profane about Borman and the people who made Exorcist 2 that they thought it would be libelous, and they never aired the show.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no.
Never aired the show.
You have it on Betamax?
I think I do.
I'm going to go buy a player now.
That's fun to see now.
Well, I've had them all transferred to DVDs.
Oh, you have? Oh, great.
Excellent.
But they look like shit. They've got ripples in them and all that. But I think I'm going to put them on
launch screening.
Oh, there we go.
We can screen it for you. I would be down for that. I'll tell you that much.
I'll do it.
That would be fun. Okay.
We'll do that.
We're going to pencil that one in for sure.
Pencil?
Yeah.
We're old school here.
Yeah, I'm analog.
Whatever. I wanted to touch a little bit upon. I didn't want to jump right into the filmmaking stuff because you segued from doing the show into writing and more importantly writing for Amazing Stories, which is kind of a pretty awesome.
But I'd been writing since I was 12 years old.
Right.
And Amazing Stories was an opportunity that had happened. I'd done lots of scripts that never went anywhere, but a feature script I had written that still never went anywhere ended up being covered at Amblin when they were looking to do it. And the first day of shooting on The Goonies, I was doing the making of The Goonies, and I was setting up an interview with Steven. And Steven, again, he knew me from the Z Channel, and he used to watch it. And I had done publicity and making of Gremlins. And so he said, "Oh, you must do a bunch of these things." And I said, "Well, I'm trying to give it a go as a writer now, so I'm not doing as much of that." "Oh, really? We're looking for writers for this new show called Amazing Stories."
Oh, wow.
And my agent at the time had sent a script in as a sample, and it got amazing coverage. And so the last line of the coverage was, "Hire this man." And so I was the first person asked to write a script for Amazing Stories. And by Steven, he said, "Let's give Mick a chance." And they really liked it. I wrote it in 3 days. They called me up, and Steven Spielberg calling.
Yeah.
And he asked me to do one. And he had written anything from a sentence to a page of like 20 stories. And so I did this one, and they were really happy with it. They asked me to do a second one. And before, I wrote the first one in 3 days and turned it in 3 days later. And it was like, "Yeah, well, we'd love you to do another one." And then halfway through that, they called and asked me if I would go on staff and be the story editor for the series. And I was on food stamps at the time.
Wow.
And it was a great opportunity. And Kathy Kennedy said, "Oh, Mick's not going to want to do that." Really? "How well do you know me?" "Not very."
Yeah. Wow.
That's
So
awesome.
that was it. Was my first opportunity.
So which was the first one that you wrote for Amazing Story?
It ended up being called The Main Attraction, and it was Matthew Robbins directed that one, and he and Brad Bird rewrote it quite a bit. And so that was the first one done. The first one actually shot was under another writer's name. He had written a script that people didn't think was right for the show, and as a story editor, they asked me to do a page one rewrite. And it was called Mirror, Mirror, and Martin Scorsese directed it.
Yeah, I remember that one.
The first script I ever had was directed by Martin Scorsese and produced by Steven Spielberg. Yeah. It's been downhill.
Awesome.
What made Spielberg as a person at that time, I mean, in general, having never met him, so unique? Was it his creativity, or is it more like a focus?
He would sweat more ideas than you would, or I would.
So just
but he was this incredibly electric human being. You'd sit in his presence, and I would go into his office to discuss a script or something that was going on, and he would always, come on in, just wait, and he'd do his other meetings before and after, and not mind me sitting there. And he could jump into where he had left off a week ago and was right on it.
Yeah.
I mean, he was so on top of everything. There's a reason he is who he is. He's a brilliant guy, and he's probably the greatest librarian of film music. I mean, he has a huge collection of film scores and the like, and really knows film music like crazy, but also is an encyclopedia of film in his mind. But, so he's influenced by it, and yet influenced everybody else, because he sort of like John Williams, somebody who incorporates a lot of the history of music into his scores, and yet they're really original, fantastic, stirring scores. And Steven has this great grounding in film history that he taps, but remakes his own way.
Right.
know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, one of my favorite things in Mick's office, because I've known Mick for a couple of years. He's always been very gracious and nice to me, and I interviewed him for the Psycho Legacy because he directed Psycho 4.
Yay!
But he's got a letter in his office from Steven Spielberg about Psycho 4.
Oh, cool!
Let us not forget that Henry Thomas from E.T. played Norman Bates. So I always thought that was kind of cool.
It was a really nice letter.
That's cool.
And yeah, you get a nice letter about your work from Steven Spielberg. It gets framed.
And
put on the bathroom wall in the office.
Yeah, nice.
So how long, after, because obviously TV writing, that's a pretty darn good gig. How long before that period did you decide to make the jump into directing? I mean, was that something kind of always in the back of your head?
Well, I was always interested in making movies from the time I was 12 years old and had an 8mm, not Super 8, 8mm movie camera that I made little movies with.
Right.
And it took, even, I was a singer in a band for years as well. And I thought, maybe we'll have success in the band and then I'll be able to write and then I'll be able to direct.
Right.
And so.
Horse Feathers, by the way.
Yeah.
On Facebook if you want to listen.
There you go. If you dare. But it took the very next year. During the first season of Amazing Stories, Disney wanted to make a deal with me and put me under contract as a writer. And as a plum, they were offering me an episode of Disney Sunday Movie, which was their rebranding and remarketing of the old Disney Wonderful World of Color that they used to do. And these 1-hour family films that were on Sunday nights at 7:00. And so I didn't want to sign with one studio and limit all of my opportunities. But I met with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and John Landis was walking down the hall. And so he's talking to me about working for the studio. And he goes, oh, wait a minute. And he went out, talked to John, came back in and said, would you like to write and direct an episode of our Disney Sunday Movie? John Landis said he would be executive producer. So if you fuck it up, we'll have somebody who knows what he's doing there to do it.
That's a good friend, right?
Yeah, really, really good friend. And he said, well, I knew you weren't going to fuck it up. But anyway, so that was my first opportunity. And it was because King Stephen had knighted me, and all the people who had never read anything of mine before still weren't reading it, but they were offering me jobs.
Right.
Wow.
So it was an opportunity that, I was fortunate enough to be able to deliver what people were looking for and have been able to work to this day.
Right.
And beyond. So.
What were I want to go before, and then we'll jump into the filmmaking. I want to know, what were the horror films like at an early age that were inspiring you, and also during that kind of golden period, were there particular gems that just really pushed you forward, knowing that you're on the right path?
Well, it wasn't as well thought out as that. When I was a kid, I just loved it. I was always drawn to genre stuff from the very beginning. And I think particularly in the 60s and the like, every outsider was drawn to it. It was not the popular kids. It was not the cheerleaders. It was not the class president who were into that stuff. They were into rowdy comedies and things. But, the people who could identify with the other. I was one of those, and most of the other people who were not popular in school. So from my very earliest childhood, I must have been 6 years old when I saw Son of Kong was my first genre movie, maybe even 5 years old. And it was a comedy. My mother protected me because she had seen King Kong as a child in a movie theater, and it scared the hell out of her. So she, well, we're going to be here. Your parents are here. The whole family around the TV for Son of Kong. And great, but it's funny until you cry at the end.
Right.
But it wasn't scary. But I just thought, this is fantastic. This giant gorilla. He looked fake. It was jerky and all. It was the 1930s, 40s. And, but it just fascinated me because it was something outside of this, I was born here in Van Nuys, was our first house.
Oh, wow. We're bringing it back up.
Within
blocks right now.
Yeah, within blocks of this
That's
studio.
pretty crazy.
Wow.
But I was born and raised in Southern California, but still outside. It was not a part of the movie business or anything. I'm the first person in my family to ever do anything like that. but I have a brother who also does now. He is an associate producer and has worked on TV shows for a long time. But, I was always drawn to the Universal classics from the very beginning. They used to run them on TV regularly every Saturday, on Channel 5. And Channel 11 would run the weird shit, like the Four Skulls of Jonathan Drake.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
wow.
I've seen that film, believe it or not.
Yeah,
it's not great, but, but the title alone got me, so I was there. Yeah.
The Brainiac, they would show the dubbed Mexican movies and the real low rent stuff. And that got me just as much as the Universal stuff. I mean, I knew the difference even as a kid, but I was always drawn to the outre, to the not normal stuff. And even in my days as a musician and music journalist, I was drawn to progressive rock more than pop. It was the stuff that would challenge you, that would put you in a different place and not be what was the most popular stuff. If it were in the top 10, I wasn't interested. I can appreciate that stuff more now, but at that time, I wanted something more adventurous and something to take me where I had not been.
Does it seem weird to you to have lived in a span where some of that has now become the mainstream, like Walking Dead success? We were talking about Walking Dead yesterday when I saw you, just in general, but in terms of just seeing the popularity of something that would have been outsider art and now is just
so weird.
Yeah,
it's mainstream.
It's like selling ad marketing.
Yeah, it's mainstream, and it's really weird to me to see that happen, because in a way, it makes me a little bit sad because I don't feel the possession of it that I did. The ownership of that brings the genre fans together with magazines like Fangoria and Warzone, like the conventions and all that stuff. That there aren't Western. Well, I guess there's a couple of Western conventions, but they're not the same. They're 80-year-old guys with long beards.
They're gun shows with a couple of film posters.
I'll trade you 2 Zane Greys for one. Yeah.
One Bud Boddicker.
Yeah. There you go. But they don't have comedy conventions. They don't have they have science fiction. They have horror conventions because it really is something that bonds people. But now you're right. I mean, Walking Dead is like the #1 TV show, or Under the Dome was the #1 show every week it was on.
And yet those people who love, say, Walking Dead, not all of them, but some of the mainstream, somebody who doesn't watch horror isn't going to be sitting around talking about Tenebrae. Or waxing lyrics. So it is different. It's like the tropes are mainstream now, but the real heart of horror is still for people who really love it.
Yeah.
It's just a different position.
And I feel like the mainstream are interlopers. It's like, you don't deserve to like this.
The rest of society has shown up at our pool party for a few minutes.
Yeah, we already paid for it. Yeah.
Maybe it happened with Thriller for a little while when the Thriller video came out, because that was huge, right?
And I'm one of the zombies.
Yeah. That's right. I actually did know that, yeah.
I definitely think that we had that kind of infiltration in the 80s with like Freddy and Jason. I mean, that was definitely much more of like a massive mainstream appeal.
Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street.
But I guess the difference with The Walking Dead, when I say mainstream, beyond mainstream, it's used to sell products and cars. and so it doesn't matter. I find the story interesting, but it's like, when a clean car pulls up and it's got a car sponsor, you're like, wow, that apocalyptic car looks pretty clean. It's just funny. It's
pretty creepy.
Yeah, it is a different thing.
I wanted to ask you, actually, we just got done doing an interview about anthology films. And when we were doing the interview, we were talking about why anthology films were so successful during the 80s, but just don't seem to work today. And since you've worked on several now, I wanted to ask you that. Like, what's it like seeing the progression of anthology films? And do you think one could possibly work on TV today? Or anthology shows, I'll say.
Anthology shows, yeah. I think it's harder than ever. I've tried to do another one, not Masters of Horror again, because we did that. It worked. It's done. But nobody wants it anymore. Nobody's interested. They want you to get into, even series used to be standalone episodes, even though they were the same cast and story situations. Yeah.
Hitchhiker and all those kind of cool shows, there would be one episode and then.
But I mean, regular TV series, even those are serialized now. They continue. It didn't used to be that way. They'd be self-contained episodes. You could watch one that you wouldn't have to watch all of them to get it. It would start and end in one show. But the idea is to hook you. And, it's like cigarettes or, your entry drug. is to get you to want to come back next week because there's always a cliffhanger, whether it's Dexter or it's, Walking Dead, or they're serialized now. So you got to watch them in order. You binge them on Netflix or on Hulu or something. And I think that maybe is the main reason, because it's difficult. Even Masters of Horror, it had a hook. It was the greatest filmmakers in the horror genre are going to be doing their movies every week for you. So you are going to see a John Carpenter movie, not an episode of Masters of Horror, but a John Carpenter movie, a Tobe Hooper movie, a Don Coscarelli movie, a John Landis movie, And without that unifying theme, and even with it right now, it's just not the same landscape it was. And even Amazing Stories, that was in the 80s. That did not do well. They redid The Twilight Zone. That did not do well. They redid Alfred Hitchcock Presents. That did not do well.
Outer Limits.
Yeah, Outer Limits. They redid them all. And Outer Limits was different because it was for cable and pay cable at the time. I think it was for Showtime, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And so
now,
the rules are a little different.
I can't recall.
I know I watched every single one when I was a kid. And it was definitely cable. I just don't remember the network.
Yeah. So the rules were different, but there was a much bigger difference between broadcast television and cable television at that time. And now cable has to catch up because, broadcast has to catch up because cable is so much more sophisticated and smart and adventurous that broadcast TV looks like grandma sitting there losing her mind.
I wanted to ask really quickly, because when I had interviewed you for Icons of Fright several years ago and we talked about Masters of Horror, at the time you were like, I don't watch serialized TV. I don't have time for it or anything like that. Is that still the case?
No, it's different.
Are you hooked on stuff now?
It's different. Yeah. I love Hannibal.
Yeah.
I think it's best show on television.
Yesterday.
Right. Yeah. I think best show on television.
And I have to binge watch all of it. Yeah. We're having one of the guests on in a couple of weeks, likely. And I have to binge watch everything.
Well, it's one of those shows that, the weird thing about them, I don't know how it used to be with us as fans knowing about ratings and systems like that. I don't know if that information pre-internet was out there or how people knew about, but it's so disheartening to be watching a show. You see an episode and you go, the artistry in that is incredible. The storytelling is incredible. Everything's brilliant. And then you go on the internet that night and go, oh, this show's going to get canceled soon because the numbers are down. Everyone loves it, but the numbers aren't there. And I'm just like, what is my brain can't process that.
Yeah.
And so everyone's like, oh, maybe it'll get sold to Amazon. So I don't know if this is a healthy thing to have those numbers float, but I do know about Hannibal. It's up to people like us to really go, hey, you guys should check this out if you want to see good stuff, because maybe it will make a difference.
But the best stuff is rarely the most successful stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
And if Hannibal only lasts 2 seasons, I will be sad, but it will have been 2 great years of TV that we deserved that we don't get.
I feel that way and I'm all for that, I agree, as long as the creators get advance warning so they can end the story in a way that's organic. I hate it when Carnival was to me one of the saddest things because I was hooked. That show had some moments of magic to it. And then when the second season, I guess whenever they got word, it just becomes this quick rap rush than the last 2 episodes.
That's how Life on Mars, the American version, was for me. The British one was very well
British
calculated.
One is
brilliant.
Amazing.
It's
one of the best things
good.
Ever.
The American one, apparently they were told really quickly and they had a day to wrap it up, and it's just suddenly out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, okay, you're going that route. So
and I
long.
think now there's a reason for the powers that be to give these shows that chance. It's because even if you cancel Hannibal after 2, if they're great seasons, people are going to buy it.
Right.
People are going to consume it years later. If you wrap it up and make it shit, it has no other life. So you hope that they see it that way, but I don't know if people do.
And some shows last too long. There have been shows I've loved in recent years that go on to season
1 or 2
5,
seasons
6, and 7, and it's like
I'm trying to make it through the current season of Supernatural, and it's just oh man.
Well, I think that number 5 is a bad number. Because all these shows will go, we get that 5-year thing. I think 3 is a pretty golden. It seems like 3 and 4. That's when you can tell.
British TV seems to do it quick and to the point.
But the reason they go for 5 is because they want to syndicate.
That's what I'm saying.
Syndication is not that valuable anymore because of streaming and physical media is dying a horrible death. And, so but the idea is they're now selling a season at a time rather than a pilot at a time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm working on a couple right now, of creating a couple shows that, the people behind them who are footing the bill, they want it to be a 13-episode commitment, not just a pilot commitment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe being a creative mind for all 13 episodes would be really interesting. Whereas if it's 24 episode season, you can't possibly be that person. Even David Lynch lost control of Twin Peaks directing in the second season. So I do think there's some kind of beauty. I mean, I think that was the thing about True Detective that you walked away with. The strongest thing about it is that those two names, the writer and director, were consistent.
Same guys every time.
And because of that, it's a very consistent show.
Right.
And we don't get that often.
The only point I want to make about anthology, since Rebekah brought anthology television, that is, because I've been thinking about this a lot too lately, is as a fan, I hate that the networks are reluctant to do stuff because they're going to redo Tales from the Dark Side, but now they change it to just Dark Side, and apparently it's going to be a narrative with because they don't want to do separate stories. They'll adapt cheaper. Some of the stories. Yeah,
it's actually cheaper to do an anthology in a lot of ways because the most expensive part of a series is its cast, and if it goes to season 2, 3, 4, you've got more and more. Yeah, whereas on Amazing Story or on any of the anthologies, but like on Masters of Horror, you never have the same characters. Yeah, you have to do new sets and new locations and the like, but that's not that bad.
Right.
But the cast, if you're paying a star $1 million an episode, and that's kind of what they are in the big shows, that's, an episode of Masters of Horror, an hour long, a true hour, not a 44-minute hour, was $2 million all in. Mm-hmm. And if you're paying $1 million to your star, and then whoever's second and third and fourth and all these people that you have to re-up them every season going up and up, that's a huge expense. So it's really cheaper to make them.
Yeah. Well, it's disheartening to me. There's also rumors that people are inquiring about Tales from the Crypt, but they want to make it a Walking Dead-esque narrative sort of thing, which makes no sense to me.
I think every show should be about zombies from now on. Right. Every movie, every TV series.
They can make spin-offs and all that.
So then I never have to watch.
But I think for people in TV, your best bet around it, I was just thinking, is you can do a narrative show that's an anthology in disguise. And what I mean by that...
X-Files was.
Yes, exactly.
X-Files.
Yeah.
X-Files, the first season of Supernatural is a Monster of the Week.
It is. And
so it's kind of like, all right,
I love those shows.
Of.
And that's why Supernatural has gone downhill for me in this last season, is everything is about angels and demons, and it's all drama. It's pretty much like a soap opera with some guys and some demons and occasional bacon cheeseburgers thrown in. So, that's where I've lost interest. But I love Monster of the Week shows. I really do.
Yep.
I do too.
From the Night Stalker on.
Yeah. Well, and that's a no-brainer remake. I mean, to me, that's a great, easy one to adapt now, I think it's probably a film. Maybe it's Johnny Depp. I think that is happening. I probably,
Kolchak is Johnny Depp.
That's Edgar
with
Wright,
Tim Burton.
But I was talking about Erie, Indiana earlier today, and that was like my Monster of the Week when I was 10, and I loved that.
Joe Dante.
Yeah, if I missed an episode, I was still there to see the kids in Tupperware the next week, and I didn't have to know what was going on, and I loved that element. So I want more shows like that. But it's the same reason I love Law and Order. I can separate myself from it for 2 years and come back, and I don't have to know shit that's been happening. No. I can still follow.
Well, isn't like everything on CW now Monster of the Week, and you've got Grimm and...
I just know at the Vampire Diaries, they have a lot of parties. Every episode ends in some sort of party or soiree, and I don't know what they're doing down in North Carolina.
Who knows?
But,
see, Grimm never did it for me. I tried a couple of episodes of Grimm, and every single one, it was like some weird monster. It was always an animal creature. Like, here's the Rat Man, and here's the Owl Man.
Monster of the Week.
Yeah, it didn't hook me quite as much as some of the other ones.
Yeah. All right. Well,
it was a William Girdler theme.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, that would be interesting. The Grizzly.
Should we tackle our topic?
Well, yeah. I mean, let's start with how the topic affected you. And so, when were you first made aware of Stephen King's work, and what was it about it that turned you on? Like, what is it about it that you noticed there was something different at work?
Yeah. Let's go around the table. When was the first time you discovered his stuff?
For me, it was Salem's Lot. I did not read The Shining when it first, Salem's Lot. I did not read Carrie when it first came out. I saw the movie. So that was probably it. Seeing the movie of Carrie was the first thing, and I thought, this is amazing. And especially at that time, there'd never been a movie like that. And then reading Salem's Lot, it was, holy shit, somebody who can really write is writing really scary stuff, and it's really human, And then The Shining was the next thing I read, and it just blew me away. I mean, it was so deeply emotional and human again. And, he sets his scary stuff in a very real, very familiar world, the people who go shopping where you shop and eat what you do. And, it's not in the upper echelon. It wasn't set in Gothic mansions. It wasn't vampires. I mean, it was, but they were in a little Maine town instead of the Carpathian Mountains, And the voice, he has a very unique voice. It's been copied over and over and over, never successfully. And it's amazing to hear that voice come out of his son, Joe. Because,
I just
Joe
started
Hill's
reading his stuff and it's great.
It's like right middle level Steve. And really great. And Joe was a PA on The Stand when he was 21 years old.
Is there a particular book by him you'd recommend? I don't know I haven't read anything yet.
Horns is really good. But
the one that
which
they got.
is being read.
Yeah, with Daniel Radcliffe.
I heard it was
But
good.
Heart-Shaped Box is my favorite.
Okay.
That was his first novel. And
that's the one I'm reading now.
Really
It's
good.
great. Yeah,
it's really good. And it has a voice very similar to Steve's, and I know it's not intentional.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about it. But King's voice, he's got such a great sense of humor, but he's just willing to put whatever he thinks out there. The thoughts of Jack Torrance in The Shining. This is a guy who gets drunk and breaks his little boy's arm. And then the guilt of that he's suffering under, that's that boiler that's going to blow. But these things, obviously, King had to relate with that stuff. And most people are unwilling to put their unsavory deepest thoughts on paper, even in another character's mind.
Yeah.
But I think there's a fearlessness about him and his writing that really is apparent. He and Clive Barker, I always use these examples. They're two of the greatest authors in the genre, and completely opposite. Their styles are completely different. King is so real world based, and he brings horrors into it that you believe because everything surrounding it is so genuine and familiar. Whereas Clive invents worlds and makes them so believable and realistic that you gladly enter that door. And so they come at horror from totally opposite directions, but both of them really successfully.
And obviously, such great minds. They build whole worlds, not just stories.
Exactly.
Like, you know what their worldview is, which is kind of remarkable. Yeah. We've talked about Clive a lot on the show for that reason.
Yeah, and I've worked with Clive a lot too. Not as much of it has been produced. But,
You did a lot of some of his stories on Masters of Horror, right?
Yeah, we did. Valerie on the Stairs was an original story, not a short story, something he had written that I adapted. His story was like, if I included everything in that story, I'd still be shooting. So it was very dense and wonderful. But also Heckle's Tale was a story I adapted that was directed by Henry Portrait, John
McNaughton.
McNaughton, yes. So we did a couple of things with Clive. I had written a script for In the Flesh that was going to be a feature at Warner Brothers years and years ago and never got made, and a couple other things. We did a pilot together for ABC years ago that never got made.
Wow.
So, he's another guy I think the world of.
Yeah.
Just an amazing. What's interesting about the horror guys too is they're, for the most part, truly terrific human beings.
Yeah, that comes up on our show a lot. And also, since having something like Jump Cut or all of the jobs everyone has here, seeing the kinds of people who come to are all good people.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think it's not what outsiders of the horror genre would ever think about the insiders.
Yeah.
That these people tend to be the warmest, which is really interesting. You can't explain it. You can't quantify it.
I think you can explain a little bit of it in that we live in a gutter without respect other than box office dollars.
Right.
And we're all in it together. And we know, that there's more going on in what we do than the outside world knows. And I think, the people who appreciate what we do are in on something. And we're, the people, I include myself just because that's what I do for a living. But, the John Carpenters and Toby Hoopers and Stuart Gordons of the world appreciate that there are people outside of the mainstream who understand what they do. you know.
Are there still films that come out now that you see and go, oh, that reminds you of that spark?
Yeah, there are times when I see it, you know, the last, you know, Paranormal Activity, you know, was something that I got
marked
excited.
Ones?
The marked ones.
That's funny because I felt the same way.
I got excited about it. Yeah. But, you know, I do a lot of travel film festivals around the world, and some of the most interesting things I've seen have been Spanish or South Korean. You know, they are amazingly polished and intelligent and
because those cultures embrace, like South Korea embraces genre.
Yeah. Well, outside of the United States, horror is not for teenagers. It's for everybody. You know, it's adult. You can write intelligent, grown-up horror films and make horror films that deal with the human condition, and not just, you know, Hollywood feels that it's for marketing to teenagers.
You have to have 13 or teenagers, high schoolers. That's what horror films have to be about, because that's who you're selling it to.
Exactly.
So if you're approaching to make a horror film about parents or anything like that, no, you
wouldn't be greenlit to make the movie Parents with Randy Quaid.
That's right.
That wouldn't fly
from
anymore.
The kid's perspective.
Oh yeah, that you could do that.
So
Bob Balaban, terrific filmmaker and actor.
Guy. Yeah. So Stephen King, first, do you have a first, or even just a first impression?
Well, I was a really avid reader from the start, and Alvin Schwartz's books, the Scary Tales to Tell in the Dark and things like that. I got to get you some books, Elric. Yeah. I know you grew up in New Zealand. You guys,
we had books.
You did,
just not that one.
No,
I don't know them either.
Yeah, see, there you go.
But I grew up reading these short stories and absolutely loved ghost stories, and then that transitioned me into like Christopher Pike and R.L. Stine, like the Fear Street books and ones like that. And by the time I was in 6th grade, I'd read up everything I could. So my mom started handing me Stephen King books, and she had the shelf, which previously I had not been allowed to touch. It was the shelf, like the top shelf in the living room, and she had all of her Stephen King like hardbacks. And she gradually started handing them to me. And I remember that the first one I read, I don't even remember which book it was, but it had the Lawnmower Man, the original short story in it. And I was totally creeped out because he ate a gopher in it, in like the original short story. Because he's actually a lawnmower man, not some guy possessed by a computer. But yeah, so that was in there. And I remember I was kind of creeped out by it, but I loved that one. And yeah, so then I plowed through those things. I like voraciously consumed.
Do you remember the first film you saw?
I probably saw the first film before I actually read a book. I think it was Firestarter, because I liked Drew Barrymore had done this Alice in Wonderland made for TV movie back in the 80s that I really liked. And so mom let me watch Firestarter. And I remember seeing that one at a really young age, but it's not that horror-y. I mean, yeah, she burns people alive and everything, but I mean, it's not like their guts are exploding or anything. No, yeah. So that one, it was
soft.
It was
directed
soft
Firestarter. We have it here. It wasn't Louis Teague, was it? No, he did Cat's Eye.
No,
Mark Lester. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one, I'll call that like a gateway horror for me, because that one, it didn't scare me when I saw it, but I was probably in elementary school. So
I have a memory of feeling like my memory of Stephen King was, I obviously had seen films first, but and I think me and you were interviewed about it one time, and I think I said the same thing, but I remember it was kind of my vision of America in general. Like, I was born here, but moved to New Zealand, but I had seen so many Stephen King adaptations, and unlike most people, they really do create a look and feel. All the films aren't the same, you know?
Well, they even made Tommy Knockers in New Zealand.
Oh yeah, that's right. They did shoot there. But there's something about it that feels like the middle, I feel like New England was how I wanted all of America to be. And I don't think I've ever recovered. Like, I feel like living in LA, I still want this to be quaint, and I don't, and then, you know, this quaint, perfect society where something dark is either underground emerging or coming in and ruining that perfection. And maybe living in a place that most people see as perfect, like New Zealand, has that kind of idyllic feel to outsiders, but inside, no one feels that way. I mean, most people leave and often don't come back. You know, I'm not saying it's a bad place, it's a great place. But
it's a great place.
It's just one of those weird things about wherever you're from. But so for me, my Creepshow was the first horror film I saw, so it had a huge impact, but I don't think it was at all Stephen King impact for me. Like, that was just a scary thing. I saw I was in a church choir, I'll never forget it. And none of us were religious, but we were in like the local church, we were kids. I think I was 8 or 9, and Shining played on TV, and I watched it. And to this day, no movie has melted my brain in a way that just changed everything about how you saw something that film did that night. And the next day, I knew all these friends of mine who had seen it, and I remember going up to them going, "Oh my God, wasn't that the most incredible thing ever?" And to this day, my best friend will never live it down. He's probably listening. they all said, it's okay. And that's his favorite film of all time now. Just pointing out, Alex, if you're listening. And at the time,
What's
I saw
that
it
t-shirt
completely.
you got on?
Yeah, I'm wearing a shiny t-shirt. But it wasn't, and I don't think, again, and this, I think the criticisms that Stephen King have, I think, are completely relevant in terms of an adaptation, but not in terms of a movie. They're two different things. And I think when the one line I read that Stephen King said about it, which makes total sense, is that it's too cold. And I'm not a cold person. And I think that's completely right. I think the genius of King's work is the warmth, like what you were saying.
Yeah.
And the genius of that particular film is just that it's just taking elements of saying and making it's just a Kubrick movie. And I just happened to see it at a young age. So again, it might not even be, if I had a third, it would be then Salem's Lot, because I think that's the one when you're a kid that's the most terrifying. I think that's one of the scariest. I think Tobe Hooper.
That's going to be mine.
I think it might be. I'll let you talk about it because I just know that as a kid discovers something just like we would.
Yeah.
There's something really frightening in that film.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I mean, for me, it's very vague, but I feel like The Shining was probably the first. The movie was probably the first. Like all the stuff with Jack. I think because by the time I was a kid, it was parodied so much.
Right.
I feel like that was my vague first introduction to King. But the one that I'm conscious of is absolutely going to my cousin's house and walking in while they're watching Salem's Lot, because we can never forget the
was
kid.
Was it on TV at the time?
It was on TV.
Yeah. The kid outside
tapping
the window.
Yeah.
My
Scared
gosh.
the absolute
That's
crap
really
out of me. Like that night, I kept waking up in the middle of the night thinking that there was somebody tapping on my window. So Salem's Lot was the first one. And at that point, you don't realize that's Stephen King. It's just some movie that scared the crap out of you. But then,
I think they get the essence. What I'm getting at is essence of King for adaptations. I think that one nails it.
Yeah, totally.
I think like Needful Things could have been that good. I feel like the book's great. Like it has that same feel, but maybe it just didn't quite get there in the movie. But
yeah,
but
well, outside of the U.S., the Salem's Lot miniseries, it was a 4-hour miniseries here. Outside of the U.S., they did an edited version as a feature and released it theatrically everywhere else.
Yeah. I probably saw that on VHS first.
Yeah,
to be honest,
the only way to get that one is VHS, the theatrical, and I hear it has like some extra gore shots in it because it was meant for theatrical UK. But Salem's Lot was the first movie I remember, and then at that point when I was getting hardcore into horror, it was like the perfect timing because then Christine was out and Cujo, like all these King movies were coming out, so it's like you couldn't avoid it. And in terms of the first book, I remember I might have said this before, but when I was a very slow reader as a kid, so it took a lot of patience for me to get into something. But The Dead Zone was the book that I really spoke to me, and it's still my favorite. It's still my favorite movie of his, my favorite Cronenberg. I love The Dead Zone, and a lot of it. I also grew up a big comic book guy, and I've said before, The Dead Zone to me is kind of the origin of a superhero, even though it's got a terrible ending.
Well, Dead Zone's also interesting.
I didn't mean terrible ending isn't terrible for the character.
Right.
He doesn't get to be the superhero.
Dead Zone's interesting because it has the absolute coldness on one hand of Cronenberg and of the world, that it literally looks cold there at the jacket, and yet the emotion is completely, I think,
it's
real
the first really emotional movie that Cronenberg did.
Yeah,
I mean, The Brood
really
has some, but there are cast issues in The Brood. But it was amazing because Cronenberg's films were kind of cold. But the Christopher Walken performance, Johnny Smith's character, is heartbreaking.
You feel that
it's so agonizing.
I remember seeing Walken on Inside the Actors Studio, and he was talking about his career, and he said that his biggest fear is guns. His absolute biggest fear. He just doesn't feel comfortable about them, and that Cronenberg, every time he would shake someone's hand, Cronenberg would fire a gun or something those jolts were all real.
Cronenberg likes guns.
Oh yeah,
he owns guns.
Well, he's Canadian.
But motorcycles and hot cars.
Yeah, it's funny how he's probably of all the directors out there, I've always thought that Cronenberg's probably the one we have the
most to worry about.
The least accurate portrayal of. I feel like he comes off as I'm this acerbic, cold Canadian guy, and I bet behind the scenes he's like really fun and
he's really
wacky.
Funny.
Really?
I wouldn't say wacky would describe him, but if you can get to, I don't think it's running anymore, but they just had this great TIFF thing on Cronenberg. It was fantastic.
I think Fangoria did
we did a whole special edition on him for that.
I wish that would travel like the Kubrick thing. I mean, I'd be fascinated.
Yeah, it's pretty great, but it was pretty specific to Toronto. You know, it's the big fish in a relatively large pond.
And so when did you, I mean, I guess the key thing is how did you first make a connection to King and then just make a decision that you would actually want to create one of his works on
Oh, it's not my decision to want to make one of his works. I think anybody would jump at the opportunity.
But was there a particular one that, like, if anything could happen, obviously it probably would have been Shining, I imagine, which took a while to get to.
Shining and Stand, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But was there something early on that just kind of resonated?
Right now, I would love nothing more than to make Gerald's Game.
That was on my list.
Yeah,
I made a list of King stuff that should be made into movie, and Gerald's Game's number one.
What's the long one? I remember reading it.
Insomnia. I just wrote totally David Lynch-esque. I wrote for Insomnia.
Well, there was a time, Insomnia was almost a miniseries.
Really?
My producer on The Shining, Mark Carliner, had actually written a script for it, but ended up never going anywhere. I never read it. I read the book, obviously. But I think Gerald's Game, there was a time when Steve asked me if I would produce it so he could direct it. And that would have been fascinating. But I would love to make that movie. It would be really technically simple and psychologically incredibly difficult.
I always assumed that one had never been made just because it was so sexually charged. And there's a naked woman, completely naked through the entire film.
But if you put her in underwear, you can do it.
It's like PG. It's totally fine.
Yeah, it's fine. No, if you don't have...
But how did you make that first connection? Because I guess all of us are like, how do you reach out to someone whose work you're in awe of?
Well, the good news was the studio reached out to me first. My agents had set up a meeting at Columbia. They were interested in talking to me about Sleepwalkers. And so we had this incredibly good meeting, and they loved how I saw what King had to do, and we hadn't really met then. We just at a signing before. I was just a fan at a science fiction bookstore and waiting in line. And so they met with me, said, great, we would love you to do this. We have one more meeting we have to do as a favor to an agent and all. And they hired the favor. And he took the script miles away from where King was, and nobody was happy. And they fired him. And I didn't know that. They called me in to meet with me for lunch. And so the meeting went really great again. But what I didn't expect is they said, okay, here's your office. And they moved me in that day. And I started working on pre-production on the film.
Wow.
So I had no idea that's what was going on. So I was lucky enough to fall into that. And King had really liked Psycho 4. He was a big fan of Psycho 4, so he was really happy about it. And
the man has good taste.
Yeah, he does.
But it also coincidentally was, Mothers and Sons.
Yeah.
With Sleepwalkers as well as Psycho 4. So it was like a theme that I never intended. Don't tell my mother.
Did he come on board as a real collaborator at the ideas, or was it more of a, occasionally you would talk to him, or did he want to be really involved in adaptation?
He wrote the script. And when I was hired, they wanted me to bring the script back to where it was with King and make some accommodations to what the studio wanted. And so I was the invisible writer. But King and I got along on the phone. We hadn't really met. We talked on the phone. And, I suggested what I would like to do for changes, what I thought might address something that would make him happy as well as the studio and me. And, I would say, so do you want me to handle this and then send it to you? Well, here, give me till tomorrow and I'll fax you some pages. And the next day there'd be these 8 pages of great stuff in there. And I did a few of the things. I came up with some of the material, but most of it was Steve. And he was very collaborative, but I never met with him until the day he shot his cameo. And that morning at Craft Services, I broke my tooth and had to rush down and get an emergency crown put.
Oh my God.
And Stephen King's coming and he could only stay for 2 hours. And so I've got, a cheek like Chip and Dale. And shooting this scene with Steve King.
He was
and
the minister,
Clive
right?
Barker.
Was he the?
No, that was Pet Sematary. He
yeah.
He was in a scene with Toby Hooper and Clive Barker. He was the keeper of the graveyard.
Oh yeah, I knew it was at a gravesite.
Yeah, and so it's not only one scene, one Steadicam shot. We start with King and then pull back to Barker and then go to Hooper, and they're all together in one thing. So he was there for 2 hours and then gone. But when it was finished, when I did my cut, I went out to New York to screen it for him and Tabby, just the 3 of us, nobody else. And he loved it. Yeah. And so he was so happy that when The Stand became a possibility, he said, I'd love you to do this. And would you want to? And of course, I'm thinking, television? I just had a hit movie in the theaters.
Right.
My career should go to theatrical films and the like. But then I got the 465-page script dumped on my porch, and I read that, and The Stand is my favorite book at the time, and I'm reading this script, and I really want to do this. I don't know how, but and everything I'd done had been really small scale until then. And so was that a hard pitch to studios to get somebody interested, or was King so hot? In The Stand?
Yeah.
They offered it to him.
Okay.
ABC came, they wanted it. King was at the height of his popularity at that time, and they gave him, I think he got like $4 million for that.
And it was a huge TV hit, right?
I'm told the biggest miniseries in history. There were 50 million people a night, and it was 4 nights, and it went up in the ratings each of the 4 nights.
I remember watching that as a family. Like my mom and dad, they never sat down together. Still don't, but they sat down together to watch that. And
we'll have to send them a DVD of The Stand just to get them
unified again.
It is the 20th anniversary of The Stand, May 8th. Wow. And next week, I'm going to Salt Lake City. There's a huge convention there, and they're celebrating. That was our center of production for the show, and so they're doing a big panel on it and all that. So I'm going back to Salt Lake City, to the scene of the crime, to celebrate.
That strikes me as something that I could imagine somebody seeing a Walking Dead potential in a show. I could see somebody taking an idea.
Well, take a look at the first episode of The Walking Dead.
There are some similarities.
I watched it and I went, I think I made this.
Yeah. Interesting.
And you shot that on 16 millimeter, correct?
16 millimeter and edited on standard definition video, because there was no such thing as high def. So it will probably never be seen in high def or on Blu-ray.
Wow. Interesting.
That opening, Don't Fear the Reaper scene, it sticks with you. I still love that scene so much.
That show was really hard to make, but it was so much fun and such a great cast. And, I spent a year away from home making that, and that Don't Fear the Reaper scene. I just had the network. One of their notes was no open eyes on dead people, and so my middle finger raised to ABC was in the title sequence, going right in on the foggy open eyes of one of the corpses, and it stayed in.
Oh, that's cool. If you have a hit, you have a hit, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't know.
Yeah.
You say things like 460 pages, and I get an anxiety attack thinking of what you had to go through.
It was like, this is not possible. And shooting for 100 days, the first 13 weeks were 5-day weeks. Mm-hmm. The last 7 weeks were 6-day weeks. Wow. And it was, it's torture, because you're talking about a minimum 12-hour day. And we were on the run all the time because so much of it was outside. And it's a dead world, so right outside the frame, there's life going on. There's freeways, and there's planes, trains, and automobiles and everything, and just trying to shoot within that with a cast of 95 speaking parts.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's not like, a film where you have like 5 principals and then, some secondaries. This was like everyone was like a principal player in it.
And you had to schedule the actors in a certain way, and you couldn't change your days because of when they could work and when they couldn't. And yeah, it was a nightmare, but the first AD, Tony Adler, did a great job of scheduling it, and the line producer, Peter McIntosh, was amazing, and he had just come off Golden Years. So.
And you said King was there for quite a lot of it?
King was there for over half of it, because we shot a lot of it. He wanted to be there, and there's never a moment where he said, I think you should shoot it this way. He was just there to be supportive and to be a bouncing board.
Did you rewrite as you went occasionally with things and having him there?
We did a few little changes, but that script was in such good shape. It was the Bible. It was, he had obviously lived that enough to know how to write that script. And the act breaks and everything were there. You knew each night had a beginning and an ending that had to be that way. And you shoot so much stuff. And in television, it has to be not just to the minute, but to the second. And so in editorial, you have to just have to shape it.
So where was the cornfield?
The cornfield was on a sound stage.
Oh, man. That was like my ideal
tell.
place.
Spielberg watched it and said to me, I really love that shot you did overhead on the cornfield. And I said, well, it's because I couldn't get down and show it. And they had ordered all of this fake corn. Well, they ordered corn from Florida because it was not at the right time of the year. I mean, I don't know when it was. We shot for 5 months, so we went through a lot of seasons. But we ordered all this stuff from Florida to build it on a big sound stage, and it all died before we could shoot it. So we had to get that crappy kind of, crepe paper corn rows and everything stuff, to do that. So, but yeah, I wanted to shoot it for real, but but it allowed me to do some very Argento-esque lighting, and to do some primary colors and do really mess around with the dream sequences and the like, and play with it, stuff I could never have done on a real cornfield.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to do this.
But
I know Rob well enough to know he's probably thinking, well, we had a plan. We're going to go through all the titles, but we won't do that now. I say we're going to go for this. We're going to just do it.
Go for what?
We're going to go through all these titles.
Are you kidding me?
Let's do them fast, though. Let's
No, I agree. I think this is...
Just a couple of quick thoughts.
No one's ever done it.
Where you saw it, whatever. Elric's idea, because when I said Stephen King...
give a quick impression.
He
of 137 movies.
Yeah, he's like, Elric wanted us to print out... Elric wanted us to print out every Stephen King movie chronologically.
And less about like thumbs up, thumbs down. We're not doing that. And Mick doesn't want to sit here and talk badly. What I want to do is like what films kind of got the essence of the story and which films maybe did their own thing and what makes one interesting. What makes one. We haven't seen all of them. There's a lot of.
There's only one on this list that I haven't seen.
Oh wow!
I'm surprised.
That's impressive.
One thing that struck me when I looked at this list was that the first 7 are like the first 7 things that were ever adapted are near. In a way, kind of perfect. Like you go, wow, up to Christine, and Children of Corn's kind of slightly, it's close. But you're like, wow, what a strong. Well, it's still fun. But what a strong start. Like you have this writer.
Listeners, the first 7 are Carrie, Salem's Lot, Shining, Creepshow, Cujo, Dead Zone, and Christine.
And I'm going to do it a different way. Now listen to this.
Follow.
Here are the directors who made those: De Palma, Tobe Hooper, Stanley Kubrick, George Romero, Louis Teague, and David Cronenberg and Carpenter. So you're like, oh my god, that talent.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to me, and there's still a lot of that throughout as we go through. And some, the thing about him that's so interesting is when we get down to the things that were like more obviously. I'm just trying to find the ones that were more, Shawshank Redemption, and before that,
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me. It's like it's such a different tone, but not. It's so perfectly him. Stand By Me might be the most perfectly.
I think it's certainly one of my favorites, if not my very favorite of the movies adapted from his work.
It's
pretty great.
I'm jumping the shark. So Carrie, you've already said, was a huge impact, and everyone here, Carrie fans?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
I haven't seen the newest version, so there's 2 on this list.
3 technically.
Yeah.
There's the TV one too.
I saw the TV one.
Yeah. We'll get to that. So Carrie, just quick thoughts about it. Well, you're a big De Palma fan. I'm not a big De Palma fan.
I'm a first half De Palma. I'm a first half De Palma fan.
To me, I mentioned it a while ago. I revisited Carrie for the first time in years, right before the remake. Even though I didn't get to see the remake, I intended to, and I wanted to see the remake. Well, yeah, because I just whatever. It's off my priority list. But I was impressed by how well it stood out, like how well it stood up to my initial viewing of it. And honestly, it's just like you look at somebody like Sissy Spacek, and you're like, I can't imagine anybody else.
Yeah.
Like
it's raw emotion.
There's no need to remake this.
And I think it's De Palma's most emotional.
It's my favorite De Palma film by far. Yeah,
it's showing that some of these cold, more technical oriented directors were then grounded by the emotion of King's work.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it on TV and probably being under an age where I didn't even know about women's periods, and when the film opened, being kind of like entranced and shocked at what I was seeing, especially like no one just shows that.
No,
it's
nobody
a private thing.
Nobody would do that scene.
Yeah, and it's that really powerful. I mean,
yeah.
And some of the split screen, some of the technique. Same with how I saw Shining first time. Filmmaking technique that's so advanced that on a young mind who's only used to seeing mainstream movies, you're like, whoa, what was that? And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Definitely, but Salem's. Now I feel like we've already addressed Salem's Lot. But did you see it when it first came out?
I saw it on the air, and I had seen Texas Chainsaw and was a big Tobe Hooper fan already, and to it was TV people, and at that time it's like, don't do this for television. Yeah. This deserves more attention. But they got a movie director to do it.
Yeah,
and the technique he did, that slow motion backwards shooting the clouds of smoke outside the window with the boy tapping on the window, that is indelibly etched in my head.
Yeah, and for me, the vampire, because I had not seen Nosferatu before Salem's Lot, so that was my first impression of it.
And it was probably your introduction to Reggie Nalder as well.
Yeah.
Who's been around forever.
Yeah.
I'd like to know more about how the sequel happened and what it
return
means.
to
At some point. I just remember Sam Fuller's
I did not include that because that's...
And I always
Larry Cohen.
Yeah, that's a strange one. We'll talk about that another time.
Larry Cohen.
Who's great. I'm a big fan of his writing in general.
Too.
Okay, well, The Shining kind of...
1980.
We've done entire shows on that.
Yeah,
I think I've talked more about The Shining in my life than anything else ever.
And I was just purely curious because I don't think I know this. What was when you saw it in theaters, like first time 1980, divorced from the book? How did you feel about it as a film?
Well, I couldn't divorce it from the book. I loved the book. It was certainly my favorite horror novel ever.
Yeah.
And, at that time, I thought I hated it.
Yeah.
And
so you had a similar reaction to Stephen King.
And every reviewer of the day. The reviews were across the board terrible.
Huh.
And, I think it's a great Kubrick film now.
Yeah.
But it's not a good King adaptation.
Right.
But and I've spent, I think, more time talking about that than I've spoken to anyone in my family. So,
well, I think it brings up a good question about adapting work. Like, should somebody make it their own, or should they be trying to keep the integrity of the work and representing that?
Well, obviously, for everyone else at this table, somebody should make it a work of their own.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But
I hadn't read the book, so
yeah.
So it's like whichever you see first.
We go back to talking about ownership of what you love.
Right.
And if you feel the ownership of that, you feel like you've been cheated on.
Right.
A little bit, you know. And again, I can appreciate, I'm a huge Kubrick fan, and I think The Shining is a great film, a great Kubrick film. But at that time, I didn't like it because it was not the book I was hoping to see, the scariest book I'd ever read. But, what made that movie, it's iconic now. And it was a huge hit at the time with young people because of identifying with the father-son relationship there and all the difficulties with that. I mean, the press at the time, again, I won't go on and on.
I stare out windows all the time like Jack does. It's like totally vacant as my son's in a maze all the time.
Yeah.
That's weird. No, but I think that's real. I think the first impact you have of any work of art, right? Like, so we're talking about if you had not ever read a book called The Shining and you had seen that movie, you probably would have been blown away. So
it's just like, what's your first Mexican restaurant? That's going to decide what you think is good Mexican food.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. I think that cannot be underestimated for anything. Yeah. Okay, Creep Show, I think still the best anthology ever made. Now is that the EC Comics and King? How does that kind of merge in terms of King's work? Because there's a real EC Comics.
Well, he's very influenced by that stuff. He's a kid of that era where it was Twilight Zone on TV. It was EC Comics. It was the Universal Horror Classics. It was all of the big bug radiation movies, all of that stuff that he grew up on. The pulp, but run through a grown-up's mind, and here is his tribute to comic book horror, and it wasn't his idea to play Jody Verrill. That was Romero asked him to, and he thought,
"Oh, interesting.
Sure."
Oh, that's funny.
I think he was terrified to do it, but
that's funny.
Meteor shit will live on forever.
And I just said this in the anthology thing. The cool thing about anthologies, especially that one, is every time I've never had an encounter where if you have like 4 people in a room, they pick a different one as their favorite every single time.
Really?
There's no like clear standout, like, oh, well, of course it's yesterday Mike Williamson's like, oh, well, clearly that's the best one. And Joe Bigos picked a different one. I said The Crate. He said
the E.G.
the
Marshall one is the best.
Yeah, at the end, the last one.
Yeah, the one with the roaches. The roaches.
That's what Mike said. That's what Mike said too.
There's no question about it.
I think The Crate.
The one with Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah, which is I really like that more and more every time.
That's
but
the
The Crate's always going to
buried
be
in the sand, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're also
Ted Danson.
Ted Danson. I can't get Hal Holbrook's just too good, too interesting. He's just too interesting a character to.
But
not
E.G.
love that.
Marshall, I mean, he was known as a very straight kind of actor, and to have him break down like that, I love that episode. That's by far my favorite.
Do you prefer anthologies where it's one sole director like that one, or do you prefer ones where you see these kind of multiple people?
My
Always
favorites have been, now that you mention it, the One Director.
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bunch of them recently, and where they give them $5,000
26
to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, it's 26.
There's a few.
And so there's too many to choose from.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
But the old Amicus films and stuff
Yeah.
were all done by
House
one
of Drip
director.
Blood and there's some good ones. Asylum.
Tales from the
Yeah.
Crypt.
Yeah. And Vault of Horror.
Yeah.
Asylum. Yeah.
Yeah, Asylum was a very memorable.
loved
And of
that
course,
one.
Robert Bloch wrote it.
Yeah.
Do you know Louis Teague? I'm just curious.
I've never met him.
Okay.
No.
I know
Big
he was
fan, though.
he was an editor, I know, at one point. And Cujo's my favorite portrayal in the history of cinema of a mother. And that's not even like, I remember seeing that as a kid and just like being kind of shocked by it. And then seeing it as an adult and going, that's parenting. In a nutshell, she Dee Wallace, who is one of those actors who's like, you're never sure if she's amazing or if she's kind of over the top. In that film, that emotion is so crystallized. It blew me away because she just is going to do whatever it takes. Even hitting her own kid just to calm the situation.
Oh, when I read that book and the boy dies, Gage, not Gage, that's
Cemetery.
Cemetery. But when he dies, I keep reading, going, okay, when is the dream over?
Yeah.
When does he come back? And he never does. And it was one of the most shocking things I'd ever read in a book. It was so brave and completely unexpected. I went 50 pages expecting him to come back for real. But no, he's dead and then comes back dead.
Yeah.
So it's a grim freaking movie.
It's powerful stuff. Do you guys remember Cujo? Cujo, I think, was one of the things that scared me most as a kid. I remember seeing that dog and being pretty scared. That could happen to the family pet.
I still can't watch it.
Yeah,
I'm such a dog lover that one, when I was a kid, I had big problems with and I couldn't make it through. And even still now I can't. And it even got to the point a couple of years ago, I became friends with the stuntman who actually is Cujo. He's in like the Cujo suit running around. And I was like, no, I'll go back and watch it. And I still didn't make it through it.
I'm surprised there is, because the dog acting is so good. It's such a
completely
character.
believable.
Yeah.
Like he just looks sad and he's getting worse and worse as the film goes, and he has this long
even the opening sequence, which is all him. It's a beautiful piece of filmmaking.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, the way it's cinematically achieved was just fantastic.
And we're all fans of Alligator.
I love Alligator.
And I read an
Alligator's
interview,
great.
an old from '83. I was looking last night. It said the lost interview with Stephen King, and it just said very simply, it said I'd seen Alligator, and it blew me away. So I knew he could do Cujo.
Yeah.
He just said I hired that guy. I found the
Wow.
guy, and I was like, oh, that's cool. You know.
And Robert Forster is so great.
Yeah,
in Alligator.
and John, and that's one of those things where the script, John Sayles' writing, elevates something because they make these in-jokes about his receding hairline, about things that were adult.
And I wonder if that was in the script or if it was something that they added to
Forster
it, because it
could've.
feels so real.
Yeah, it's much better than it should be. One of those movies where you're like, that's better. Yeah, okay. Some of these will go, obviously, who has The Dead Zone, I think, collectively.
Masterpiece.
Yeah, it's
love it.
probably one of the best synthesis of a director's vision and source material, it seems to me.
And an actor, because like that was the last time that that Christopher Walken, after that he kind of became that quirky, weird, character actor.
Yeah.
More of a character.
But I mean, he that's the most emotional performance he's ever
It
given.
was a broken-hearted performance.
Yeah, and he's so great in it.
And Brooke Adams has always been one of my favorite actresses on earth. Like I look over a very small filmography, actually.
Yeah.
But everything. I love Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
yeah.
Love her.
Yeah, well, and in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, she does that.
Oh, yeah. I wish we have to take a video of
Oh my gosh.
of his beady eyes. That was pretty crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah, he's got crazy.
Gosh.
I never knew Mick had crazy eyes. It turns out. Okay, so and
It's
then
our little secret.
Christine, I don't know if we've talked about here. You've got a shirt. That's one I never liked until recently.
I was never
Didn't like it
into
as a kid.
Christine.
It holds up really well.
No, I saw it. It
it's
came on
great
TV.
now, yeah.
I think I talked about it maybe a few months ago. It came on TV. I've just casually watching it. I've never loved Christine, and I couldn't believe how well made it was.
Yeah.
I was like, this is one
It's
of Carpenter's
very-
best made movies.
It's very slick.
Yeah,
In a
it's
lot of
strong.
ways, in ways that his filmmaking wasn't.
Yeah.
And also, one of the early interviews I did on my website was Keith Gordon, specifically because I had found out he became a director, and I was just so fascinated.
He's
by
a
his
very
career.
smart guy and a good director.
Great director, and I mean his performance in that, just from start to end, like kind of being the nerdy guy and going through this transformation.
Did he
I always
discuss
thought it was
like
so.
learning from, because Elsie's in Dressed to
Yeah,
Kill?
he talked a lot
directors?
about he was already interested in directing. So both guys like De Palma and Carpenter were very open about the process.
That's cool.
And the thing I found fascinating, because I asked him like, oh, you were doing a Stephen King movie or whatever, and he's like, you have to remember this is the early '80s. Like Stephen King wasn't Stephen King yet.
Right, he's just a popular
it-
writer.
It wasn't like there was a ton of those types of movies. So
He was pretty much there.
yeah,
In
just
the early 80s.
Children of the Corn, 1984. Unlike the other movies we've mentioned, I don't know if this one will hold up if I watch it now. Like the other ones tend to get better. But as a kid, watching other kids kill adults, I remember this impacted me very deeply.
It scared the hell out of me when I saw it as a kid. Malachi and Isaac, I was so disturbed by the whole concept, and He Who Walks Behind the Rose. And yeah, I've seen it recently. It doesn't hold the same effect.
I don't remember it.
I think the power is the kid. He wasn't even a kid. John Franklin, who played Isaac, was
an adult by that point. He just looked young.
Yeah, he had some kind of disease that didn't let him age or whatever. So there's just something disturbing about a kid that you could tell is sort of an adult.
He was like wise beyond his years. Yeah, it had like
that's what worked about the movie to me as a kid, at least.
Do you know from inside knowledge with Steven, does he have particular films where he goes, oh, that person really did something really interesting with my work, and I really admire what they did with it?
Oh, yeah.
Not just like that's a great movie, but were there any particulars that might surprise us? I mean, obvious.
Probably not. I mean,
Dead Zone, I assume he was.
He loved Dead Zone, and I don't think there'd be any surprises
Okay,
there.
none of the smaller.
He can tell, but he also has a great protective wall that is, you didn't screw up my movie. I mean, my book. The book is right here.
Yeah.
And it will stay there. If you like the book will stay there. And somebody doing a bad movie from that book is not going to hurt the book.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good philosophy. Firestarter, I don't have any real memories. I remember kind of Drew Barrymore lighting things and not being, I don't know. You seem to have a
I watched
clear
it when
amount.
I was a kid, but I don't have a great memory of it.
Was it a hit? Do you remember if that was a hit?
Not a big hit.
Yeah.
I think it did okay.
Yeah.
They made a second one at some point,
Yeah.
but Firestarter, Cat's Eye. I'd like to revisit both of those actually at some point because I don't remember them.
Cat's Eye, I don't think
Cat's
I-
Eye,
yeah.
it's another one I don't remember. But
Yeah, there's some good stuff in Cat's Eye.
is Cat's Eye is an anthology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
cool.
the one with
Quitter.
Quitter. Is that the one with Quitters Inc. in it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, Louis T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silver
There's some
Bullet,
really good stuff.
Good
I
memories.
love.
Oh yeah,
I
me too.
love Silver
It's a lot
Bullet
of
too.
fun.
I do.
It's just light fun. That's
Gary
the fun one.
Busey in it cracks me up because it looks like he was rewriting his character as he goes, where like halfway through he shows up with a cigar and then he has a hat on. It's just like this character just suddenly wears a hat.
He's not acting in that movie. He's just being Gary Busey. And I loved, that movie, because I was a huge werewolf fan growing up. Wolfman's my favorite Universal monster. That movie made me go back and find Cycle of the Werewolf with all that and introduced me to Bernie Wrightson.
Which is where it came from.
Yeah,
there
it's
wasn't
beautiful artwork and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, Bernie's so good.
Maximum Overdrive. Now, we've seen the trailer of this a lot recently because Mike Williamson has it on 16mm and has played it before two different films, I believe. And it's such a great trailer because Stephen King is narrating his own trailer. Like, a lot of people, adapt my work, but now I thought I'd do it myself. And he looks really out of it.
Want
kind of
something
nutty.
done right, you do
it yourself.
It's great.
And it's definitely probably stronger
Comes
than
back
the
to
movie.
haunt you.
We did an article a couple of issues ago in Fango about how somebody actually found that Green Goblin truck front.
How would he have pulled that off, though?
I
Using a Marvel character like that in a movie.
Back then,
was it a Marvel character?
Yeah, that was
okay.
Spider-Man.
I think nobody
I thought
knew
it was
at
like
the
a
time.
loose adaptation.
That's
of
pretty
it.
direct.
No,
That's
it's
the Green
direct.
Goblin.
Yeah.
More
But,
so than,
apparently it had been sitting in a junkyard for years and years, and some guy found it and bought it and has restored the entire thing. So.
What's surprising to me about that film, and the only reason why I guess it's partially worth discussing, is because in his books they're also emotional, and it's also about horror. And this was a really strange one. If you were going to throw yourself into the directing chair, this is like an action film, and you got Emilio Estevez running around. It feels like
he wanted to make what he called moron movie. He wanted to make a drive-in movie, and he was not well served by Dino De Laurentiis. His crew, his DP were all Italian, most of whom did not speak English well.
Interesting.
And I think it's also hard to make your first movie, and there are a lot of strikes against it. So,
and did it scare him off wanting to do it again, or did it just? How did you think it affected him going?
Well,
forward?
we never did it again.
Yeah,
he wanted to do it. There was a time where we talked about doing some stuff together with him directing, But after the accident in '99, that was the last. He just doesn't want to do it anymore.
Right. It was a very hard physical job too, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the next 1986 Springs, what everyone was just saying, is probably one of the best
Stand By Me.
from someone you wouldn't necessarily expect
film.
that kind of filmmaking from Rob Reiner.
No. And yet, he had done great stuff. The Sure Thing was terrific, and Spinal Tap is amazing.
Yeah. So maybe he had the broad spectrum of,
And then later on, obviously, he proved that he's a really good Stephen King collaborator.
Right. Yeah. We'll get to one of the best ones. Yeah. What is it about? Do you remember seeing Stand By? Did you see it in theaters? Or?
Oh, I saw a screening of it at Columbia. And, it was unbelievably powerful to me. I mean, it just hit all of the cylinders I was running on, and it just felt so real and so human. And from what I'm told, Bill Warren, the journalist in the genre, was at a screening with King, I guess, and said that it brought him to that King couldn't talk afterwards for like an hour.
That's
wow.
So,
I mean, we were the age. For me, we were the age of the kids. So
you know what it is to me, and this will sound weird. I always thought of it as a sequel to The Goonies, where they grew up. I felt like these beautiful kids with this imagination, which I was one at that. I was the exact age, and it was so imaginative, and you could get into adventures and be okay. This is the one where you couldn't. You had to grow up once you were in the adventure, and they were so similar, and they had even had some similar class. There's something about those two films that maybe it's like ultimate double feature. I've never seen them back to back, but
that's a good idea.
Could actually be a New Beverly. Maybe. But there's something beautiful when you can watch something that's threatening too. The Kiefer Sutherland character, it's not like in a movie where you have to stab a bunch of people. Just their presence is scary because you remember being a kid, and older kids were scary because they could pin you down, or they had that ability to be more powerful.
And what is Pluto anyway?
Yeah, right? Yeah. And no, it's a really special movie.
And Jerry McConnell, who would imagine that he would come out of the little fat kid?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Not Alexander Aja. Seen that movie where he's in 3D naked, swimming with models in the Piranha 3D. So, okay. So, Creepshow 2.
Yes, I think it counts. I like it.
Many people love The Raft.
I do.
Yeah,
I love
the raft. I think is the best part. And Michael Gornick, was a DP. He was Romero's director of photography, and was our associate producer on The Stand. He did all the post production.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
I also really like Thanks for the Ride, Lady.
Me too.
Just the voice
Scared
alone.
the crap
Thanks
out
for the
of me.
ride, lady. Is great. But The Raft is definitely one. I hear people all the time saying they should just remake a movie based on The Raft.
Just on The Raft,
because it's such a fun story. But was that a hit? I guess I wasn't really around when that would have come out.
I don't think it did well.
How many years? It's maybe too many years after.
Yeah.
If you're going to follow up with something.
At least a good 5 years between them. Yeah.
Interesting. And then this brings up something. I think there's some really interesting short stories that most people don't necessarily know of King that get adapted very left-handed that seem to do really, The Running Man's a really great idea. There's a genius ahead of its time idea.
Under his pen name, right?
That
was a Richard Bachman.
The Running Man I absolutely loved when I was a kid, and I don't know why, because that's not a movie for a 10-year-old girl, but I absolutely loved that movie. I still do.
Yeah, I think it's still brilliantly made.
Probably
it's
best
hilarious.
If you're 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
Well, the funny thing about most of the Arnie films is you can look at them, and especially that period of that and Total Recall, and Total Recall was meant to be Cronenberg and William Hurt for a long time. And you look at that and go, and then it's same with Running Man. Imagine William Hurt in that role. I feel like it would have taken on just anyone who's regular. The problem with Arnie is that he was super. Even though they're fun and of their time, they take away the everyman.
Yeah, it does not hold up because of
Arnold.
See,
your old governor.
I loved kind of just the insanity and the absurdity of it. I mean, Dynamo, who sings opera while, going after people. I just loved that absurd element.
It's not as good as I remember as a kid, but I just hold so much nostalgia for it and think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I
Jesse Ventura.
I still kind of love it.
I haven't seen it since it came out.
So it's really, it's made
I'm at a disadvantage because I was an adult for all of these movies.
I remember looking it up and being shocked because it was on TV recently. I was like, oh, this is very well made. And I looked up the guy and it was...
Paul Michael Glazer from
Starsky and Hutch.
Starsky and Hutch.
It's one of the guys from Starsky and Hutch, which is kind of amazing. Yeah.
There is another. Stephen King has a couple of stories that are kind of the game show-esque quality, but there's another one from him called The Long Walk that I've always wanted to see made into a movie. It might not be very exciting.
I have not had that. More people have come up to me and said, you really got to make a movie of The Long Walk. He wrote it when he was 19 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a British film that's really close that most, not not with the futuristic elements so much, but Punishment Park by Peter Watkins, who was a big Brit director.
I know who
for
he is, yeah.
His first film was basically set in the 70s, and it was basically all the hippies were rounded up, and on a long, endless road, hey, go walk, and some of you will survive, we'll let you out. And guys with guns basically just follow them, and as they falter, they get killed off.
Wow.
And it's and it's shot like a documentary. So you feel like you're completely watching something that real, and it's obviously a dystopia, but shot in a way that feels like it was happening now. Couldn't recommend it enough. It's one of those very powerful, but it has a lot of similarities.
Without
the story.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to another one that has a lot of similarities later.
So look that one up if you're interested. And then Tales from the Dark Side.
Pet Cemetery, you forgot.
Yeah, Pet Cemetery.
Which is one of my favorites. I'm still scared of Zelda. That's
I
Zelda
actually met on Pet Cemetery. It could have been my first feature, but it wasn't. So I didn't get the gig.
And I mean, Mary Lambert, I didn't know much about her before, but it seems like a very well realized adaptation. So did you know much about her as a filmmaker before?
King had director approval, and she had done a lot of music videos, and we've gotten to be friends, in recent years. And so he knew her from the music videos and stuff, and was very enthusiastic about that, which was great.
Yeah, it's a pretty shocking. I don't know anyone who wasn't just floored by that Achilles.
Oh my God!
Achilles cut. It's just shocking, and because as you said, it's a young boy, and when he comes back, he's even it's much worse than if you had just buried your child. I think it's a very strong in his filmography.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I put Tales from the Dark Side of the movie because he wrote the segment Cat from Hell.
Yep.
And anytime we get to mention that, that's cool.
Yeah, that doesn't ring a bell. The one that I remember is the gargoyle one. So
this one has what's his name? Buster Poindexter. What's his real name? David Johansen.
Johansen.
He's in it as and William Hickey. William Hickey is being tortured by a cat.
Yes.
And he hires David Johansen to kill it.
Yeah, I remember. That's fun. It's a fun.
It's a fun one. Graveyard Shift. I remember when that came out, but I don't think I ever saw it.
I rewatched it like 2 weeks ago.
Giant
rats in the basement of a garment factory, or cotton. It's something to do with like fabrics of some type. But yeah, I always liked that one for some reason.
It's got a great cover with the skull and the
I always like that one. And it's bats. I mean, there's giant bats too, so they're not just rats.
Rat movies. I never get into rat movies. I don't know what it is. Willard, that there's like a number of
unknown origin.
Actually, I do like that one. Yeah, George.
Yeah.
Well, that's because Peter Weller. I'll watch Peter Weller do almost anything. But Food of the Gods. There you go. That's fun too. So maybe I'm wrong.
Bird Eye Gordon.
It is somewhat polarizing because it seems like there's some very good work in it.
Yeah,
and I always say I really enjoy Tommy Lee Wallace as a filmmaker.
Oh, yeah,
He's really a fun, creative.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. I absolutely love the first half. The second half is where it falls apart a little bit. But again, it's because I love the kids. The kids' story is so good.
The kids' story is great, but the part that scared me was the second half because it opens up with them in the Chinese restaurant when like shit starts crawling all over the table, and it's got the guy killing himself, and then she goes to the house that used to be hers, but the old woman's there now, but it's not the old woman. That was the part that when I saw it on television just like scared the bejesus out of me.
And that was huge at the time, right? That was another one of these miniseries that must have captivated.
A two-part miniseries. And Olivia Hussey came to us on Psycho 4 right after having shot it.
Yeah.
One of the best looking people on earth.
She's gorgeous.
Still.
Gorgeous. And I think, didn't she have a daughter who was in the remake?
Yes, her daughter.
And she was really,
just gorgeous.
It was in the genes.
Yeah. Yep.
But that film is getting a really interesting remake because it's the director of True Detective.
Really?
And they're making it's for TV.
Wow.
Or it's two movies. Well, either way, it's two. They've said very clearly. So it's probably two feature films.
They've been saying that about The Stand for so many years.
Really?
I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Okay, interesting. But I believe they will with that. So it'll be very interesting to see what he does because a lot of people who are watching True Detective haven't seen the film he made before, which was an Emily Bronte. What is the kind of spooky gothic classic film, which is escaping me. It's not Tess. It's you look it up. It's not Wuthering Heights. One of those classic, not Jane Austen, and it's incredibly gothic, and it's
really.
I remember watching it. It was not. Maybe it's Jane Eyre. Yeah, Jane Eyre. It must have been Jane Eyre. And I remember it's not my kind of movie. I was dragged to it, and I walked out liking it much more than my wife, going, "Oh my God, that was like a gothic ghost story that has like Michael Fassbender. It's really good." And so it makes sense that he would go to something spooky, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they do Pennywise.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, I mean, Tim Curry is just like, it's just one of those performances that is like so indelible with when you hear it, you think of him in that. And then Misery, I remember when that came out in theaters. And was probably one of the best adaptations of his work, for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. You know what I hate though? I was reading before doing the show. I was reading all these things. That film's so great just because of Kathy Bates. Blah blah. I'm like, you know what? It's not possible having a great performance without the other reflection.
Oh,
and I feel like people are like, James Caan is playing really in some ways against type. This is like a macho guy who's just been basically castrated.
Yeah.
And to see an actor like that in that position, I think is where a lot of that power came from.
Oh yeah.
And also a surprising casting choice in a way. I think.
Yeah, well, he was not at the height of his career at that time, and it was a bold choice. And Kathy had never really been in a movie before, and she'd been on Broadway. She'd done Broadway, and she was just amazing.
Yeah.
Obviously won the Oscar for that, and returned the favor by doing a cameo in The Stand.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll never forget seeing, as a kid, seeing that in theaters, and just the last 20 minutes, everyone in the theater was going crazy.
Oh, so
when it
good.
comes
It's
down,
probably
it's
the
so
best
great.
self-contained horror. People are always
pretty
like, just
amazing.
make a film in a room. Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
That's a brilliant version of that.
It's great.
Right. Sometimes They Come Back, which directed by Tom McLaughlin.
It was a TV movie.
Yeah, I
I
saw
don't know if I remember that one.
It was
I saw
actually
it.
really well done, and on video they released it widescreen.
Yeah.
So I think
I saw it on video.
internationally it was released theatrically again.
Yeah.
It was another Dino De Laurentiis thing, and Tommy's a really talented filmmaker.
Yeah, he's
He and
coming
I
on in a
have
few
worked
weeks,
together.
and he's another musician. Like he's still touring. I
Yeah,
remember Joe
the
was telling me.
Sloths. I've seen them a couple of
The
times.
guy
They're
who-
great.
The guy who played the lead of the bad boy gang in Sometimes They Come Back, like the lead of the gang. I saw him at Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and he still looks exactly like he does
Wow.
now. And
So
I
he
went
came
up to
back
him, and he was excited because he was meeting Fangoria, and I was excited because I was meeting that guy. So there's a picture with me of him, or of us together on Facebook.
Yay.
And most unlikely franchise of Stephen King. The fact that they made 2 sequels to that is
I feel
kind
like
of
it had
amazing.
some
Direct-to-video.
connection to Christine, though. It felt like in terms of the world. It felt
Yeah.
like
Well, I think Tommy intended that.
yeah. But it's
Tom,
interesting.
Tom did he's a really good director who hasn't really been able to do features lately.
Yeah, and
he's really
Well, I mean, for those listening, if you didn't know, he did Jason Lives, which it's a really fun one. Like,
That's my favorite.
I mean, he has the
bunch.
Jean-Paul Sartre book with the little kids reading. There's just little jokes there, like that's so ridiculous, but it is a
And
fun
what
movie.
were you going to be when you grew up? That's one of my favorite
fantastic.
lines in movies.
So hopefully we're going to talk to him because a friend of ours who was on the show who wrote Lance Henriksen's biography is now coming out with a book of interviews with Tom, and so they're going to.
And at the Leatherface screening, because Kate Hodge was in that, so everyone's like, "Do you guys know Kate Hodge?" And
Tom and I created She-Wolf of London.
Yeah,
together.
that's what I screamed out. I was like, "She-Wolf of London,"
And he and I wrote "Go to the Head of the Class" for Amazing Stories.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, where are we?
Am I too ambitious with this?
You're too ambitious.
I think we're going to wrap it up now. Let's go to
cut it forward.
Why don't we
then
just
Under the
list
Dome?
ones.
Yeah.
Why don't we
okay.
just look over and see if there's some that
that I didn't make?
Well, let's Golden Years. I don't even think I've seen Golden Years.
Yeah, I haven't.
No, I remember that on TV, but I don't remember it at all.
You know which one? There's one on here that I seriously debated doing when we did our Guilty Pleasure episode that I was going to argue for. Night Flyer.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like
good.
that.
I don't
Night
remember.
Flyer is
I
good.
have read so
Cost
many
$1
bad
million
reviews of it.
That's a good
love
one.
Night Flyer. That one, I think it's
Mark
great.
Pavia.
That's not a
yeah.
debate. That's a good one.
Okay, see.
And something about Lawnmower Man that you may not remember was that they put it out as Stephen King's Lawnmower Man. It was
Right.
nothing like it, and he
Not a bit.
sued to get his
I
name
didn't
out.
know
off of it, yeah.
He sued them to take his name
Wow.
out.
I'm kind of
Yeah, it
glad
was
of
new
That was a
that.
big hit,
because-
wasn't it? It felt like a big movie at the time.
Well, it wasn't a big movie. It was successful.
Yeah.
And it's one of those
definitely
movies that
thought
looks
theatrical.
bigger than it costs.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure it would age terribly,
I
especially
mean,
with the
it's all the
effects.
computer graphics.
But at the time, I remember it being kind of blown away. I remember the one thing that
Wasn't it Pierce Brosnan?
it was
in there?
Pierce
Yeah.
Brosnan and Jeff Fahey, but I remember the one moment that was totally effective and would always is that phone ringing. That first moment where all the phones everywhere start ringing was actually scary.
Yeah.
But that's
It just wasn't wasn't really a Stephen King.
Right. That's interesting.
Right,
yeah. Tommyknockers actually creeped me out the first time I saw it. And then I went back and saw it again, and it wasn't quite as startling as I remembered by any means. But for some reason, that first time, it was a little creepy.
Sure didn't look like America.
No, that clearly was
I don't
not.
remember Tommyknockers as well. I'd like to bring up 1992 Sleepwalkers by Mick Garris.
I haven't seen that.
But I'm actually, and I don't even think I should call this. Well, we had a debate episode where we were defending guilty pleasures, but then on the flip side, none of us believed that any pleasure is guilty.
There you go.
So for some reason,
I'll take
Sleepwalkers, that was one of my ones. But then I realized it's not really a guilty pleasure because it's not. It's it's probably regarded as good. But it's really, I've said this to you many times in person. It's a film I really love, and I think I was at a certain age where the sexuality of it, without you might have been restricted with nudity, but sexuality isn't nudity.
No.
And I feel like there's so much going on between them. Alice Krieg, who's just one of those actresses who I find electrifying. Even though she's not classic, good looking like Madge. The different relationships are so interesting. There's just something about that movie. I don't think I understand what it is. That
the sick stuff is what I like the most. That was the most fun to do because it was like, well, I'll tell you, the studio changed hands during the middle of that. But when we started making it, before we started shooting, the head of the studio said, I am not going to make a movie. As long as I'm head of this studio, we're not making a movie where a boy has sex with his mother. Halfway through, he was gone. He was not the head of this studio.
No, I mean, it was pretty shocking. And also the first time seeing the flashes of their true selves is also in the sexual moment is like, I think it's in a mirror or something. Where it's really like,
we had a fake reverse room behind there with actors in the makeup and the costumes. Yeah. But I had to make a lot of cuts in that scene to get the R. It went back 5 times to get an R rating, but the original plan was to do it all in one shot. You start in the mirror where you don't see them, go down to see the clothes on the floor, pan across that, go to their feet, and go all the way up their bodies, and then reveal in the mirror.
Oh, nice.
And so I wasn't going to cover it, but I'm glad I did with the overhead shots of the faces and side views and things, because they wouldn't let it happen. And they said it's because of the movement of the boy's bottom.
Right, the thrusting.
Yes.
I've heard that.
Which I've seen it in many movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
I heard there was some classification thing at one point where 3 thrusts equaled a fuck.
Oh.
And one thrust is not fucking in the censorship. So if there was a multiple of thrusts, it was very strange.
Interesting.
Well, it was... the stories.
Yeah, no.
We have a long list here.
Yeah. But
we're just going to cut through them at this point because it's too much.
I like Rose Red a lot. That was always one of my favorites. It's a very classic haunted house story. And it's pretty much about the Winchester house. It's kind of a fictionalization of the Winchester house.
I'd gone up to the Winchester house and I took video of it and sent it to Steve before he wrote that.
Yeah. I loved it. And I tried to watch, they did a prequel to it called The Diary of Ellen Rimbauer that I didn't make it through.
Yeah, I actually put that on the list, even though King didn't write it, just because I didn't know about it. And I thought it might be interesting to mention.
Yeah, it's pretty dry, I got to say. I tried to get through it, and it was a little stuffy for me.
I have to ask, does Stephen King, what did he think of The Mangler? Or just, because Mike Williamson loves this movie so much. I feel like
Toby
we need
Hooper.
That.
Come on.
Yeah, face fan. Yeah, it's just what The Mangler was.
In South Africa, and no money in it. And
really?
Yeah, it was very inexpensive.
A very restrained performance by Robert Englund. Okay, we need to rewatch that. We've all been convinced to want to re-see that.
Another one they made 2 sequels to. So
I bought it after we did our Guilty Pleasures episode. I went out and I paid money to purchase
on DVD?
The Mangler on DVD.
Okay, good. So we have a reason to rewatch it.
Physical media lives.
Exactly. We're going to rewatch that one. Okay. Obviously, there's this other strand of King, which is things like At Pupil, Green Mile, Shawshank. I think that's worth just talking about in general as a stream of his work. Obviously, there may be the less horror-based ones of his stories, but they tended to cross over pretty well.
Yeah, and they never put his name in the title or in the ads.
Oh,
it was just hidden because people would think it was a horror movie, and they would not get a mainstream audience. They'd get teenagers. So. The Shawshank Redemption, you look at the poster, the only place it's in the credit block based on the novel by.
But Green Mile was different, right? Because it was...
Green Mile, same thing.
Oh, really?
They hid his name on all the advertisements. Stand By Me did not say Stephen King.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
it really is a different strand than we are talking about not exploiting his name.
And Shawshank Redemption is interesting. I had written and directed an episode of Amazing Stories called Life on Death Row. And it's about a guy, a convicted murderer, who during a prison escape is hit by lightning and is revived, and his touch can heal. And so he goes through the prison healing people with his touch. And when I heard that, when I read the book, I thought, gee, this feels familiar. And years later, Steve said, I do kind of remember seeing that episode. So it was like, I love.
That's your first brush with Oscars.
Yeah, right. And last, no,
not this year.
Well,
you never know.
Something else.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, I imagine Stephen King was thrilled with Shawshank.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like Darabont in general, he must have enjoyed it.
I remember going and visiting the set, and it was Steve celebrated his 50th birthday that day on the set at the lot,
that's cool.
Warner Hollywood. Yeah.
I put Shawshank Redemption in. Me and Brian Collins have a list of 5 perfect movies.
Okay, you're skipping The Stand. That's okay.
Well, we touched on that today.
1408 still scares me.
I like that.
That's one that...
You know what? I haven't read the story, but just before we came in here, we were talking about anthologies, and he said it was the scariest story he had ever read. The guy who was interviewed, he just said it really unnerved him.
What a pussy.
Which one?
Yeah. You hear that? He called you pussy. He said, fortunately, I haven't read it, and I want to now because the film I thought was actually pretty good, except for a little bit of the effects that took you out occasionally, which is still a problem with the effects now. They can take you out of the movie.
I saw it way after it came out, like on video, and I love the first half. Yeah. It's just the second half I remember
third act. It gets a little weird and not as cohesive as the rest of the
film.
movie.
And that's the weird part about taking a short and expanding it. Like sometimes it works beautifully, and sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought the first half hour of that movie's really, really effective.
Well, it was a huge success.
Yeah.
An unexpectedly huge success.
Yeah. And now Cusack and Sam Jackson are in The Cell together.
Oh, wow.
They're paired up
I didn't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My least favorite, and we're not haters on the show, and we always try to defend movies, but the fact that Brian Collins liked it, the worst film I've ever seen in a theater in my life, for me personally, tonally, was Dreamcatcher. Because
saw that in a theater?
I saw it in a theater, and I was like, oh, Lawrence Kasdan, big fan.
I saw it with King and Darabont.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I've never read the book. Huge Kasdan fan. My jaw dropped many times during that film because
I just don't think it was the right match.
Yeah, but it kept changing dramatically. Suddenly it's a military film. Suddenly it's a UFO film. Yeah, it just for me was one of those movies where now I get maybe it's getting a cult because of that, or like a small cult of people.
It's getting a cult.
Yeah, well, Brian Collins was telling me it's like his dream thing to screen.
But Brian Collins likes all these weird. He's tried to convince us how many times that My Soul to Take is the greatest film ever.
That's true. You're right.
I like My Soul to Take.
Okay,
I'm pushing an eject button on Mick.
Back it off.
But no, and I don't want to hate on it because maybe it has some quality, but for me, it was tonally so out of place with that work. So
one word.
Dolores Claiborne
eats really world.
It is.
I love Dolores Claiborne.
That's a great
movie. Who directed that? That was a really
Taylor Hackford.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Secret Window was a big one for me too.
I like that.
I like Secret Window a lot. It's not even a critique, but what's great is on the DVD they have deleted scenes, and it's not even an alternate ending. There's just like literally 5 seconds more of the final shot. And they cut it out of the final film, and I think it makes the movie. Like, I wish that last 5 seconds was in the actual cut of the movie. I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil it if you've never seen it, but I think the movie would be great if they just had that last 5 seconds that they cut out. So,
interesting. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, what a difference that can make in a movie. Like in The Mist is another one where this whole, hey, let's switch it to black and white. Often it can sound like a flippant thing. Yeah. But in that one, I think the reason, I remember watching it and thinking it was a very good movie, except that the effects, when I watched in color and on big screen, there's just something that was kind of ruining it every time. And then when I started in black and white, I was like, oh my God, this is like a film of paranoia.
I loved it both ways.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
The performances are great.
And
the bleakness
is
different.
Yeah, the bleakness is different. And King told Darabont, if I'd thought of that, I'd have done it too.
Oh, interesting.
He loved it.
Because that's one of my favorite short stories I've ever read. I think a lot of people had dreamed of adapting it in their life. So seeing it realized was...
Well, Frank wanted to do it for I think he had it for 20 years or something before he made it.
What was the reason? Was it just studios wouldn't let him put it out in black and white? Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a shame. Because I think that would have really... Because it didn't do well anyway, right?
No.
So it would have been cool if at least it could have gone out there the way...
Yeah.
I'd love to see it in 35 that way. I guess it's probably impossible.
It's cool that both versions are on.
Must be something you could put on a lens of a projector to desaturate the color. No,
you can't take it out with a lens.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, any other ones Any other ones that we haven't mentioned that are favorites in the room?
I think I'm spent. Oh, Thinner. I'm sorry. I just saw that one. I was spent. I always
Tom Holland's
liked
Thinner.
Yeah.
I've never seen Mick. I can be honest with you because you buy coffee occasionally. I've never seen Riding the Bullet.
Chai.
Oh, you know what? I've never seen
that film.
Really?
Should I watch it?
Well, it's the most personal movie I've ever made.
Oh,
it's
cool.
the one that's
I
closest
haven't read it
to
either,
my
so I
heart.
don't know. What's the source material? I don't know
The source material, it was King's first ebook.
Oh.
And it's really a 30-page short story, basically. And it's about a kid who's in college in Maine gets a call that his mother's had a heart attack. And he's got to hitchhike home to see how she is. And he's picked up by what may be an emissary of death who offers him a choice and says, by the time we get to the next town, you or your mother is going to have to die. And you have to make the choice. And if you don't choose, I'll choose you both.
Wow.
And you both go. And it's a very small film.
Is that Ron Perlman or not?
No, this is Barbara Hershey and Jonathan Jackson and Cliff Robertson. And, you know, I wrote it on spec and I set it in 1969. And there's a lot of stuff that came out of my life. And it's a very emotional kind of movie. It's the most unsuccessful thing I've ever done, too. But my agent at the time thought we're going to make a killing with this spec sale and it's going to be a big movie. And it never happened because people wanted it to either be a horror movie or Stand By Me, and they didn't want it to have elements of both. You know, and so it was made, Brad Cravoy financed it, and it was made independently. It was released in 3 cities, very wide, including LA, with no advertising. Not $1 was spent on television advertising. And it completely tanked. I mean, I went to theaters where it was playing, multiplexes and stuff where people were just looking, what are we going to see? And they didn't even recognize the title.
Right, it didn't register.
Passed it by.
Because it's also not one of King's recognizable titles for them.
Right. Well, it was a big, big success as an ebook. But, you know, it was Stephen King's Riding the Bullet, and he graciously allowed us to put his name on it in the title. But it did not connect. And the reviews, people either loved it or hated it. More of them hated it than loved it. And so it's one of those things where it's your baby and it's the one you feel closest to and protective of because it was the damaged child. You know?
Right.
But, you know, of course I'm going to tell you, I think you should see it.
Now I'm kind of sold, especially with the
I,
personal touch of it.
Well, and later on, you know, I've gotten more personal responses from people that were affected by it than anything else I've made. And just, you know, it debuted on the USA Network, which cut the shit out of it. It didn't make any sense because there's a lot of going backwards and forwards in time and in dream and reality and you know, not knowing which is which. And so it's just a total mess that was on Sci-Fi and USA. So they had it for 6 years before it came out on any other, you know, pay TV and stuff where they don't cut it up.
We always love seeing behind the curtain. How hard is it in a career when you have a film that, you know, it's personal to you, it doesn't connect with box office? How hard is it to get the next job in life? And how, you know, just
it was my first feature in a long time. I'd been doing the writing and stuff, but I had not directed a feature since Sleepwalkers. So, you know, all of my stuff had been miniseries and movies for TV and Masters of Horror, things like that. So, it didn't affect my feature career at all. But had it done well, it would have. Right. I would have been making features.
Right. Interesting. Okay. No, I'll see it. No, we'll talk about it soon.
It's $6.93 on Amazon and just added to my cart.
It might be on Netflix though, right?
I don't think it's on Netflix, but check fan.tv.
Okay. Well,
I'll find where it streams.
And very, very briefly, I also want to mention by Mick, the film next on the list is Desperation, which I remember you bringing, I think it was like the first 10 minutes to a Fango convention with Henry Thomas and Ron Perlman. And it's a great opening. Just a very intense full.
Yeah.
I mean, Ron Perlman's intimidating as it is, but I just remember it's a really, really strong opening. And So that's one.
It's one of my favorite sequences I've done. We saw it and it was very powerful opening, and it works, and things happen you don't expect.
Yeah.
In the first 10 or 15 minutes, and it's powerful. I must say that when Perlman's character dies, the movie loses a lot of its energy because he's such an amazing character, and it does go into a place where King is a believer and I'm not. But when you're making a movie like The Stand or Desperation, you're telling a story, and you believe the story you're telling, and you have to.
Yeah.
And I think I really like the movie, but I think losing the character of Perlman, and it becomes about a kid's faith being tested and the like. It loses the energy, and I think the audience doesn't stick with it all the way through. So
that is an interesting, and that's brings up another interesting thing about adaptations. When people they're just different belief systems. Another interesting one to me was sexuality. I remember Naked Lunch just being a fascinating adaptation because they're totally different people. And yet, the film works, and it's just, but the sexuality of it, there's moments where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You have a gay writer being adapted by a straight writer, but also one's more of an intellectual versus, it was just interesting. So I think adaptations in general are these two personalities.
Like Crash too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Ballad. Yeah, it's just an interesting. I don't even know if I have a theory on it. It's just interesting.
It's interesting. That's all it needs to be.
That's true. That's true. We don't have to understand. And Under the Dome's obviously been a success. I haven't really seen it. I remember seeing the pilot and thinking it was maybe
watch it.
It looked okay, but it looked like an interesting world. Definitely felt like a King world. I feel like Bates Motel feels like a King world, weirdly enough. It feels like, I wish
more
it was
than a
better.
Hitchcock world.
Yeah, more than a Hitchcock world. I would go with that for sure.
Right, Rob?
Yes.
Rob knows that.
Yeah, I love it.
And is there anything now we know from talking to you, obviously you're working, you've been working, adapting a great book into a film that's not horror. What's that experience been like? Is that the kind of experience that
it's not a creative experience for me? Basically, what's going on is the book Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand is about my father-in-law, Lou Zamperini. And it's the most successful book of the last 50 years. It's huge, and it's a phenomenon. It's 3.5 years old, still in the bestseller list, and still in hardcover.
Wow.
But Angelina Jolie directed the movie from a script by the Coen brothers and Richard LaGravenese.
Wow.
And she is amazing. And the movie looks fantastic. This is Universal's big movie this year.
Who plays the lead character?
Jack O'Connell, who is a British actor you're not familiar with unless you've seen Skins or some of the other stuff he's done over there. He was in the second 300 movie. But he's great. And Louis is still around at 97 years old, and it'll open on Christmas Day. It's like I say, it's Universal's big release this year, and it's not, well, it's more horrific than anything I've ever done, but it's not a horror story.
Right.
It's World War II.
Well, it's a survivor story.
It's a survivor story. 47 days on a life raft, 2.5 years in a Japanese POW camp.
And he was Olympic gold medal winner for America.
Not a gold medal winner, but he ran in the 36 Olympics in Berlin and
cool.
met Hitler, shook his hand.
Wow.
So pretty phenomenal. And he's still here to tell the tale and to see the movie that Angie made. And
it's pretty amazing.
Ironically, they can see each other's homes.
Oh, wow.
He lives in the Hollywood Hills, and she lives just a couple of blocks away down there, and they'll flag signal each other occasionally and stuff. So they didn't know it until after it happened. But that's kind of exciting. So,
yeah, it is. No, it's just a different kind of thing. I think that's cool. And you're doing a lot of TV still. You're still been directing some TV. And
I've got some stuff. Like I said, I'll be working with Machen again this summer in Vancouver. I'm creating a series for another television star right now, and another series for a studio, and just had conversations today about directing a feature down in Australia, an Australian feature, not an American feature made in Australia.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Written by Australians.
Everything is Australian except me. If I do it.
So what would you do with Wolf Creek 3? Good on you, mate.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty
Rogue. I love Rogue.
Yeah, Rogue is good. That was my problem with Wolf Creek 2. I was saying last week is like that he should have gotten a bigger movie by now. That director is showing that he can direct. He deserves a real.
He waited too long to come back to the original.
Bigger canvas or whatever. Well, I think we still blew the doors off talking about Stephen King tonight.
Yeah.
I feel pretty good about this.
We kinged it out.
I want to continue that one.
And we are going to follow up about these Z Channel things because I think this could be fun. It could be fun.
Yeah.
Especially because none of us have seen it.
There's a few snippets, I think, on YouTube of some of them. So
we'll post one this week.
Yeah, that might be fun to
check
watch.
it out.
Well, like I said, I'm thinking I might put them on a YouTube channel.
Yeah,
so everybody
cool.
That'd be awesome.
See them, but do that with the postmortem interviews because a lot of them are the same guys 30 years later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's Hooper, it's Carpenter, it's Landis, it's all these guys.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
I love those. The postmortem was an interview show you did on FearNet for a little while.
Yeah. Wes,
Excellent
and
stuff.
I think there was a really good one with
The
Freakin'.
one is one of my favorites.
And
That was
actually, I
pretty
say,
great.
you know, the one guy I remember who I've never gotten to talk to except out of these kind of shows, which I had the best conversation ever, was Robert Englund because he's such a good storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the great thing about postmortem was that we would just record for an hour and cut it down to a half an hour. But every one of the people who came on talked about things that they'd never talked about before, that I'd never heard before. And I think it was because the whole point was to try and have a setting like this where they just feel completely comfortable. I'm friends with most of these guys.
And I think that's a
but
big
not
part,
all
right?
of them.
Because it's like they can talk to you just like a conversation.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just like this, you know, we're all friends here.
Yeah. No, it's really effective because of that, I think.
Yeah.
And it helps. You know, it's not just an interviewer interviewing, it's somebody who's been in the trenches with them, you know, and in a lot of cases together, literally.
Yeah.
Was there, I mean, I guess that's the only natural question is, was there anyone you didn't get to, or if you had gone on for another few episodes, was there someone out there you're like, oh, I never got to talk to that person?
Quentin was going to do one with us. Guillermo was going to do one with us. Romero was going to do one with us. And they would still do it, but it's too hard to organize.
Well, me and Bekah say this a lot about Tarantino, is like, that's the one thing more than anything I would want him to talk about because he has this huge love of horror, and yet I've never heard him have that like long, in-depth conversation just about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he comes to some of the Masters of Horror dinners, and the discussion gets there.
Yeah, it would be. I'd like to see that angle about his mind.
And he's a pretty amazing guy.
Yeah. Do you think he would ever make a horror film?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll bet he will.
Yeah. I know there's talk of a home invasion one right now, but it's knowing him, it won't be.
It'll be something different.
I thought that was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Oh,
too.
was it?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Maybe.
There's enough of them. I think Hateful Eight. I think that Western thing was an April joke. Anyway, that's another show, another one down the track. Well, thanks so much for coming. It's been a real blast.
No, I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, and we'll back next week. I believe, I have to confirm, but I'm pretty sure David Scow's coming in next week.
Yes.
Be awesome. His first podcast.
Oh,
sweet.
Okay, thanks
All
for
right,
listening,
we'll see you
guys.
then.
Bye-bye.